Hi, welcome everyone. Welcome to our webinar on communication success stories. Probably if we were the Games of Thrones, we would call this Season 3, Episode 1, as this is the first webinar in our third year in a row. And this is also a special one, as we have no less than 11 speakers lined up for you. So probably we should call this a webinar marathon or something, or a webathon. As for any and all of our webinars, this is the fruit of a collaboration between GFAR, the Global Forum on Agriculture Research and Innovation, who organize these webinars, together with several of our partners and affiliated organizations and members of our GFAR communicators community worldwide. During this webinar, the man behind the scene is Charles Plummer, who will manage the slides and the technical aspect of the webinar. My name is Peter Cazier, and I will be moderating your questions. And I also have the honor of introducing our speakers. And I also managed to get one slot for one presentation for myself and present a GFAR project. Now, Charles and I both work for the GFAR Secretariat, and we managed in daily life their social media and online channels and outreach projects. It seems like for every webinar, we are on our toes to see if all of the technical tools and the connectivity will work. Of course, with that many presenters, something might always go haywire, so be patient with us. So as usual, we're challenging the gods of connectivity. We're patching 11 presenters joining us from across the globe, from Australia, Asia, Africa, Europe, and the US. Three of our presenters are actually on the road and are somewhere sitting in a dark room hugging a Wi-Fi node in their hotel or conference center. We extend the apologies for Jason Kalogenda, who was supposed to join us from Tanzania, but he is currently battling another challenge with delayed flights and missed connections. So last heard, he should be at the moment flying somewhere above the Sahara. But before we start on the webinar itself, a word on the logistics. For this webinar, we are all connected through a service called BlueJeans, which allows everyone to see the presentation and those speakers with a webcam. Feedback, tips, and questions should only be done via the chat box. So please keep your video and your audio muted if you are not a presenter. Otherwise, it will suck up a lot of bandwidth and we'll hear background noise from your office. Even though we are with a really big group, we had 165 registrations for this webinar. I would still like this session to be as interactive as possible. So I do encourage you to send remarks, suggestions, and questions already during the presentations themselves using the chat box. The chat box is the icon which you can find on the top right-hand side of your window. During the webinar, we'll have one Q&A break after all of the presentations. So if you have a question or suggestion or remark for any of the speakers that pops up in your mind during the presentations, just type it right in. And we'll go over them during the Q&A breaks. After this webinar, I will send you a mail with a link to the recording of the webinar, the presentations, and some links to websites and resources we might have mentioned during the webinar, or answers to questions that we could not all answer during the webinar itself. Today, our webathon showcases a set of what we consider communication success stories. It is my firm belief that we can learn a lot from our peers, especially in a fast evolving field like communications. And we want yet again to use our webinar platform to share these experiences. Our goal is to give the background on 11 exciting projects that the speakers specifically were involved in so they can inspire us all. The structure for today's webinar, as you see on the slides, is we'll start with two speakers who will give an introduction to the art of finding new audiences and engaging your audiences. We have Michael Victor, who will speak about their continued new approach to blogging and engaging the online audiences through blogs. Katherine Clifton is joining us, explaining new ways that she has worked with to identify key influencers and market target content. Then we have 5 speakers who will introduce their outreach projects and designing the way that they designed outreach around events and conferences. Christy Accra will explain to us what they did with the IIT A at 50 project. Anwa Kira from ICRAF will explain the event they did on the International Day of Forests and Water World Day. Conor McKeegan is joining us from neighboring Brussels here and explain their experiences with the fascination of Plant Day project. Elizabeth Sharma is joining us from the UK, will give us a bit of a rundown on their Farming First SDG 2 countdown campaign. And Boris is joining us from Slovenia and will explain their project on social media and communications around their event EFUF 2016. Then we'll have two presenters who will introduce innovative ways to engage audiences, mostly in a face-to-face environment. Camilla Vogt is joining us from Laos and will introduce her Cloning Around project, which is designed around engaging communities in agriculture. Alpha Senon is joining us from Australia at the moment, who will introduce Y-Farm and their Agriman approach to motivate their engagement in agriculture. And then the last two presenters will be spin-offs from communication projects, showing us some of the possible longer-term effects that we could have from a single project, and also how, with a comms project, we can try to change the world, one blogger or one youth at a time. We'll have Magesh Chander joining us together with Alpha in Australia. Mahesh will introduce his personal story in engaging in social media as a scientist. And I'll close the set of presenters introducing the YAP, the Youth Agriculture Project, as a communications project with an attitude of changing the world. So let's kick this show on the road. Please keep your audio and your video muted. Meanwhile, Michael, you can unmute. So to kick off, allow me to introduce our first speaker, one person I see as one of my long-term partners in communications crimes. Michael is a communication knowledge management and policy engagement specialist with more than 20 years of experience delivering on strategic communications, production of high value knowledge products, facilitating multi-stakeholder learning and dialogue processes in agriculture and natural resource and management sectors. Michael now works for, I think it was Tabby, wasn't it, Michael? Take it away.
Yes, okay, I'll take it away. Thanks, Peter. Thanks for letting me join this this presentation. I'll be talking about an idea, really, and I'll talk about that in a second, from the CGR research program on water, land, and ecosystems. I'm currently the team leader for a project here in Laos that's funded by SDC called the Agro-Biodiversity Initiative. But I was asked to speak on kind of an innovative thing that we did at the Water, Land, and Ecosystems program a couple of years ago. So this is a story about an idea and how an idea comes to fruition. And where do ideas come from? Ideas usually come from talking with people, from brainstorming, from sitting in the shower and thinking about something, riding your bike, wherever they come from. They often don't come from writing up a project plan or coming up with a logical framework. They often don't come from asking for permission. So that's why I have this up on the first slide. If I had asked for permission for doing this blog from the research program heads and from IMI, I don't think this would have ever happened. It was something that just kind of cultivated itself and came. Next slide, please. So the Water, Land, and Ecosystem really is a different program for the CGIAR. It doesn't focus on technical improvements. It doesn't focus on just agriculture practices, but really focuses on a paradigm for changing agriculture. As many of you know, the CGIAR research programs were set up on existing projects and activities of the CGIAR and its partners. So it was really difficult. We were thinking about, what are we trying to do here? How are we going to do communications for the program? Everyone was very excited about doing communications, but how are we going to do it when the program really isn't creating any of its own content, its partners' content, its centers' contents, and how does that fit with this new idea of a paradigm? So talking with some people, talking with the head of the program, he was very excited about this. This is a revolution. We're going to have a new paradigm for agriculture. It's not just about improving yields, but it's about how we think about food systems and agricultural production as well. And I started thinking, well, if we're going to have a revolution, we need a manifesto. And if we need a manifesto, we're going to have a conversation. And what does a conversation needs? Conversation needs a blog. And I think that's where this really came from, the idea that we're going to have a conversation rather than just creating content. The blog was created in 2012. It was the Agriculture and Ecosystems blog at that point, and then renamed to Thrive in 2015. Next slide, please. Maybe just click through all of them so they come up. So one of the things is that, oh, go back, sorry, there we go. So yeah, what we were really trying to do here was move beyond, kind of find the sweet spot. We weren't going to be advocacy oriented. We have a paradigm. I mean, a paradigm is very different than the normal research program or research organization where you're going to, test out something and then present the results, really kind of classic science communication. Here we needed to engage. It's about behavior change as well as providing an evidence base. But we don't want to be extreme. So it's kind of, the beer and the porridges, one's a little bit too hot, one's a little bit too cold. We really wanted to find this sweet spot of evidence-based engagement. And what I mean by that is that we inject research results and analyses into processes that decision makers can use. We develop relations, we get feedback, we create a process. So it's not just about presenting the results of the research, and it's not trying to advocate for something, but it is trying to engage. And I think that's where the blog, we tried to find the sweet spot in. Next slide, please. So the blog is, this wasn't supposed to be just kind of a, promotional articles about the program or blogs about a new paper that comes out. It was really supposed to be a conversation. If we're going to have this revolution in agriculture, what does that mean? What are some of the messages that we might be playing with? What are some of the ideas that we have? Let's start talking out loud. And that was what the blog was really about. It was also about a way to generate content when we didn't really have content. Let's start to get some of the ideas and the initial thinking out rather than just focusing on the research results. Let's get people with different sides of an argument. Is sustainable intensification, is it possible? Is smallholder farming possible? We started out with questions and then get people with different viewpoints with an evidence base, not just with opinions, but that actually had evidence and something to say. It started out slowly, but it really had the snowball effect. Once we started, we started with a couple of people. Within a couple of months, we had a full lineup, a full pipeline of bloggers going. Really, in the first 3 years, we hit a huge amount of page views. We were up to about 500,000 page views in the first 3 years. As we see here, 500 blog posts. A lot of comments in the beginning. There was a lot of comments, a lot of discussion. Again, a lot about the conversation. One of the interesting things was we had a newsletter that was, kind of a weekly, review of the blogs, but also kind of gave people kind of links to other things as well. And that really was kind of generating its own subscribers, and that got up to 1,000 very quickly on its own. And again, we had a range of authors, so it wasn't just one or two people or communication specialists writing, it was researchers themselves. Next slide, please. Some of the strategies that we said is, like I said, we focused on the conversation. We created a separate space for the blog rather than having it on the website. The website is the, for better or worse, is the kind of like, is the corporate space, the corporate identity of any program or any organization. So to have controversial topics on that would often be difficult. So we created a separate space that was just for the blog, and we created a disclaimer as well. And we made sure that there were different ways to see it. So the website was for promotional communication, information provision, and the blog was our think space. Early in, Peter asked in a separate email a couple of days ago about where does your most traffic comes from. We found that was really interesting that we focused on LinkedIn in the beginning, LinkedIn groups. So we went to groups that we thought the conversation should go to, and we actually posted on those groups. And in those groups, we had huge conversations that people were talking, had 40 or 50 comments in one kind of in one group for different blogs. And that was generated, I think, at one point 20 to 30% of our media referrals. So many comments there as well. Next strategy. Let's see what happened on that side. So the other thing is really trying to tap into current and important conversations. So it wasn't just that a new research paper came out, but we really tried to find what is current topics? How do we relate to that? How do we relate to important conversations? One example was, I mean, it was just a great question. Does farm size really matter in Africa? And we had a great kind of blog from this kind of a very experienced man from that was living in Malawi, Stephen Carr, and it generated more than 15,000 views in the last 5 years, and hundreds and hundreds of comments. Similar, we tapped into the big controversy about big dams in the Mekong and the Mekong River Commission, and a very dry paper on institutional analysis of the Mekong River Commission, once it was blogged about in a very kind of conversational way, was able to generate, became one of the top 10 downloaded journal articles in that journal. Next slide, please. And again, like I said before, it became an ideas repository. WLE, it was a very hard program to message around. It didn't have a really clear-cut purpose. So this was a way that we actually evolved our message. So we didn't have a strict message. Here's what our messages are. Boom, boom, boom. We have 2 messages. But we tried to create our message through the blog, which actually helped us kind of talk about it. Once you talk about it, you refine it over and over again. Next slide. And again, I think we wrote for an engaged audience. We didn't try to write very bland articles, and this also sometimes got us in trouble. But we tried to write for an engaged audience in a very fun way, and a very informed way with very good writers. For instance, we had Terry Clayton and Fred Pierce, who's a pretty famous writer, who they really wrote on topics in a very different way, and that was very hard for researchers oftentimes to deal with, but it actually got a lot more people talking. Next slide. And again, just to quickly, some of these challenges at the end, again, that you'll find out in, I think, in any process, is the issue of, who has the final edit? Is the communicator? Is it the researcher? Is it the head of the program? We had a lot of politically sensitive cases like the Mekong, and how do you deal with that? How do you deal with local partners and local sensitivities and make sure that you're not getting people upset? We had conflicting opinions. Sometimes we would have bloggers who had a negative opinion of a project that we were doing, and we let that go, and we let that conversation happen. That always wasn't very easy, and it wasn't easy sometimes for directors and managers to see, but we had that conversation. We tried to really see both sides of it as well. Translation and national and local participation were a big issue, particularly, just to get it out more farther. And then I think nowadays there are a lot new blogs coming up. There's The Conversation, and I forgot there's a couple of others. So we hit a good time when blogging kind of for the engaged audience about science had not really hit a huge peak, and so we were able to capture an audience. Nowadays, I'm not so sure. It would be much harder to start a blog, I think, in that sense. Next, final slide. So just the recipes for success. I think whatever we do needs a champion. And we did have a champion. Her name was Abby Wardolf, who kind of came in and really took the idea of the blog and really took it farther. We also had champions above who helped protect us. My program director, Simon Cook, and then Andrew Noble, all really championed the blog and really took the heat when we had some controversial subjects. This idea, again, not everything can be done by a plan. And I think taking a gardening approach rather than taking an engineering approach in this instance really worked. Just starting it off and getting it going, getting a couple of blogs on there, and then things rolled from there rather than having a big plan. Again, as because of that, we built a coalition of the willing. We did face-to-face engagements, really worked with researchers on it, and it was gaining trust. So it was this whole process rather than having a plan and trying to get what are the outcomes and everything, really just working with people day-to-day basis. And again, we had active promotion with a champion there. They're constantly getting out the message, getting it out onto different channels, and that really happened. And again, encouraging the critical discussions, making sure the disclaimer was out there. I think that's it. No more slides?
And
Yeah.
you've done it, Michael, in 11 minutes and 5 seconds sharp.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, I was 1 minute late.
No,
Takes
that's
me a
fine.
while to get wound up.
And it's a challenge to talk about our projects, of course, within a slot of just 10 minutes. Next one up is thanks again, Michael. Next one up is Katherine. Um, I see you already unmuted your video. Welcome, Katherine Clifton. Katherine works on fostering new approaches to ICT for development at the Catholic Relief Services, CRS, documenting learning and assisting in communications. Prior to this role, Katherine worked in implementing technology in agriculture programming. She is passionate about sustainable business models and approaches. Katherine, make sure that your audio is muted and please take it on. The next 10 minutes are all yours.
Great, thanks. Everyone can hear me?
Yes,
Okay,
go
so
ahead.
the last presentation was wonderful. I think if you can do a blog, it's fantastic. I think all the things he said, you've got to be willing to talk about controversy. You've got to keep audiences engaged. We haven't done that yet, and I think it's a good question to ask yourself. Okay, are we ready? What do we do if we're not ready? Maybe you make the no-go decision and you want to focus your time elsewhere. So when I came onto this position, there's a lot of support that was needed for ICT4D, but most importantly, we needed to do a better job of telling people what we were doing. And those people were senior development professionals, and we needed to get the word out there. And I was kind of just given like, well, what do you want to do about it? And I'm a team of one, right? So some other people are going and engaging donors and talking to them. I can't do that very well as a team of one, and I can't grow my reach. And so I wanted to use a digital strategy that enabled me to grow my reach. It doesn't mean I don't want to go and have those conversations, but I wanted to do this first and kind of focus and see who are my key influencers, how are they engaging with me, and how can I try to build a little bit of that online. It's been great because I already have people I can talk to when I go to meetings. It gives me a little bit more targeted approach. Next slide. So I think the most important thing I've noticed, I'm actually a technical person by training, not a comms person, and I fell into comms also under Andrew Noble at a CG Center, which is really funny. And so I think that a thing that's really important is always to ask the 5 whys, and the guy who came up with this must have had small children. And the last why is really kind of gets to the meat of the matter. And to me, that's because we believe in what we're doing and we want to do more of it. So why do we do communications? Why do we want to get the word out about what we're doing? Because we want to get more funding, and to get more funding, people have to know what we're doing and believe in us. So next slide. And you need to bring that with you all the time and communicate that message with you all the time. I can't overemphasize how important it is to kind of have your 3 key bullet points and explaining to people why you're doing what you're doing, so that they also invested in your message. I believe in what we're doing. People need to know about us. Business development is not just writing a proposal. It's about pre-positioning yourself. It's about hyperlinking your work and proposals, not just scientific publications. It's about partnering with key partners online. And really explaining that. And sometimes people still don't connect with that message because we have all these different kinds of personalities in the space. So then when you run into the scientists, I love telling scientists, well, you can have the best research in the world, but if nobody knows about it, it's not the best research in the world. That's a quote from a senior scientist I got that I love. Another one I think is, you can go back to Einstein. He's got lots of wonderful quotes out there about, your sign of intelligence is how clearly people understand you. So not only do you need to write in a clear manner, but people need to know what you're doing. So I think that those are kind of great quotes to memorize in your head, bring them with you to every meeting, just to make sure we're all on the same page when we get started. So how did I tackle this challenge? Quite frankly, I was very uncomfortable as a non-communications person. I was like, this whole social media thing, Peter's trained me, this is great, but I'm still a little uneasy here. I really am a numbers girl. So I went into BuzzSumo and I got a trial license for a month, and I put in my keywords of our content that we create. And it was really great because it gave me an Excel spreadsheet, and that is wonderful because it gives me the most amount of share rates by article. And so then I went in there and I'm like, okay, well, I've got all this data, and what's the data telling me? And unfortunately, last time I looked, most of the times you don't look at an Excel spreadsheet and it doesn't jump out at you and tell you what to do. You got to do the nitty-gritty work. So I created another column, and I created just kind of some key categories of what the content is. It is a theme. Is it a like a policy article? Is it a trend? So is it a trend? Is it a policy? And we'll go over that in the next slide. And the other thing I also looked at is like, who's creating that? And the reason I wanted to do this is I wanted to see, okay, of the top content that's out there, what is it? What kind of writing structure is it? Who's publishing it? And where's it going? Because I'm a team of one and I've got to focus my effort in these really great places so that we get the biggest reach. Now, you could argue, hey, well, but we're senior researchers. We should put it on our internal site. And there's plenty of people that thought that. But I don't necessarily think that that's always the best approach ahead. So I follow the numbers with the hypothesis that any content that we wrote that was going to meet the public at large and had a better share rate was going to do better in front of our target audience as well. Next slide. So here's what I did. I tagged them, whether they're a trend, a meeting, a warning, programming, training, funding, activist, video, beneficiary, and you may say, and so. Well, this was a big change for us because at CRS, we'd written a lot about programming, beneficiary pieces. That was not going to move the mark for us. That was not what was engaging large audiences by and large. You could have quotes from beneficiaries as to why, the trend you're talking about is important, but we're not going to be writing just a story about Juan and why Juan's life changed. That's great, but that was not what the numbers were telling us. So we said, okay, we're going to start real low, do 2 blogs a month, representing our core competencies that talk about important things in this way. And then we're going to repost them in all these places that we're seeing. And I also had an Excel, and I don't have it here, with the numbers of times that different mediums, different sites publish this key content. And we wanted to go there because we wanted to improve our brand recognition. And we thought by doing that, it was important to be on other websites, not just our own. We can always relink back to that on our own internal website. So that's our approach. We actually said we are not going to write internal website content just because it wasn't going to get us the bang for the buck. We didn't have large audiences that were coming to our website for this key content area. We do in other areas, but not this content. So, okay, next slide. So there's all these great ideas of what you can do, but I think it's really important as a team of one of also to know what you're not going to do and have key communications as to why. So all the time I get people, hey, well, why don't you write an internal blog? Hey, why don't you post stuff on our write this great content of whatever you want and put it on our internal website? The reason I decided to not do that at this point was that we didn't have a large enough audience. We needed to build that audience before we brought them there, and that we needed to up our brand recognition by being on these sites like ICT Works, DevX, Medium, USAID, Relief Web, Next Billion. I love CRS's work. I'm a CRS boomerang. I left my PhD to work for CRS. I left to finish it, and now I'm back again at CRS. But I can tell you, working in these different places, sometimes people think we're missionaries, and we're not. I mean, we operate. We are an arm of the Catholic Church, but by and large, most people I work with are not Catholic. We don't ask people what religion they are when we implement programs. So we needed to change. So we do some very high-tech technical stuff, and people don't always know about that message. So we needed to make sure that that message was getting out there by putting on these places that you see and this website, and we needed to start there. So that meant I had to explain to people why we were not creating a blog and why we decided to not do our own write-ups for internal sites. We send our media people to a place called Media Center where we do our own write-ups. We decided to not do that. We can't do all of these things, so we wanted to target just on getting our content out there. And one of the benefit of getting on these places is we had to learn really quickly how to write for these different websites. I wouldn't have gotten that great at my writing approach had I just done internal stuff. And so it was a challenge I needed, to be honest. Doesn't mean you don't write a blog, doesn't mean you don't create internal website content. That was just not our goal at this point. Next slide. So how do you do this as a team of one? Well, I did BuzzSumo alerts. Anytime we had an organizational mention, I go through those once a week. If I see an ICT4D mention, we then send it out with a social media post plus our own published work. So I have like a feed of about 5 or 6 articles. I call out people that wrote stuff internally. I call out people that were mentioned externally. I call out people that are sharing our stuff that BuzzSumo tells me. I can look on key influencers. I take the content that goes out and I get in these email alerts. I put it in a save list in BuzzSumo, and then I have an automatic dashboard that tells me the top share rate. So I can know at any time what our top share content is. When our monthly newsletter comes out, I can say, okay, export to Excel, sort by month. what's our content for the month and what's our top articles for the month, so that I can shoot people to there. So it's this really great feeling of, you don't have to be in comms to do comms. We just want you to try, and if you succeed, we're going to call you out, and if you don't, we're still going to celebrate you doing that. I'm going to help you edit. Ultimately, it's a lot easier for me to edit than to write, and I think that I can't undermine this small, simple thing that, you can't just be going and saying, I'm comms. You got to get people on your team and them to want to be there and build value. So that email message is talking about why this is important, really quick and short and sweet. Here are our posts, make it easy for people to post these things online. And guess what? We started seeing large Facebook numbers just from our internal email, that I was able to convince our social media team to say, hey, can you start sharing us a bit more on Facebook? And they were listening to us because I'm going in that conversation with numbers. Next slide. So why is this a success? Because we went from, instead of 2 articles a month, this started in May. We now have 22 plus articles. I got a spot award in our department for this work. The Facebook internally, our CRS Facebook account has taken some risks and posted our content that that media stream was more focused on church audiences. They've now taken some of our tech content, put it out there. It's done well. They're taking some more small risks. I was given a summer intern to help assist and take all of those great content from Medium and ICT Works and repost it on USAID forums, and that we learned a whole lot from as well. We have content with 100 plus, 1,000 plus shares. We've been able to get more external media pitches from our internal teams. And so I would say I hope you can learn from my approach and do likewise if you think it'll be helpful.
Very good. Thank you, Katherine. And I think we have in the chat channel already some discussions coming up, whether to blog or not to blog, how to start, interesting exchange of ideas. Katherine, thanks for explaining the approach you've taken for CRS. We are moving to the next speaker, Kwesi. Okay, I see you coming up. You can unmute your audio also. Christy Accra is the Director, Country Alignment and Systems Integration at IIT A. He assumed his position in January of this year. Prior to this, he was the Executive Director of the Humid Tropics CGR Research Program. Earlier, Dr. Accra served as Deputy Director General of Biodiversity International in Rome from 2005 to end of 2013. While in Rome, he was also served as the chair in the International Alliance Against Hunger and Malnutrition in partnership with the FAO, WFP, and IFAD. He holds a Bachelor in Science in Agriculture, Crop Science from the University of Ghana, a Master of Science and a PhD degrees in Natural Resource Management from the University of Ibadan. His professional interests and expertise span food security, integrated systems research aimed at livelihoods enhancement for smallholder farmers. He has several publications in technical journals and contributed to a number of books. So, Kwesi, it's all yours. You're also coming from, let's say, the non-communication science. Interesting to hear what you did with IIT at 50. Go ahead, Kwesi.
Thank you very much, Peter. Yeah, that's true. I don't come from the communication, formal communication, but I do believe that communication is everybody's business. If you want anything to succeed, communication definitely has to be a key part of it. So what I'm going to talk about is how we use communication as an instrument for the celebration of the IIT A 50th anniversary. And can we have the next slide, Charles? Okay, so it all began with a signboard because this is the first signboard that announced the creation of IIT A, the beginning of the construction. The institute was established in July 1967, which basically means that 20 years old. So we had this huge challenge of how do we celebrate our Golden Jubilee? And we really didn't want it to be great on a day and finish. We wanted to give it a huge significance because we see the 50-year mark as halfway to our century. We're looking forward to IIT being 100, and so the 50-year mark was seen as a very important milestone where we needed to be able to reflect on the past as well as look at the future. Can we have the next slide? So the big question really is, what is it that we are celebrating? We're celebrating three key things. First, we are celebrating the progress achieved over the 50 years. And there has been tremendous progress in various dimensions, not just in the business of research, but also in the business of delivery. In other words, taking research from research into the hands of development and bringing livelihoods enhancement to smallholder farmers. And we have tons of experiences in that regard, which we needed to celebrate. Secondly, we wanted to celebrate people who have been involved with the organization, either as alumni, and even families of the staff and the alumni. We also wanted to celebrate partners who have been part of the work that we have been doing over the years, and donors and investors who have put their resources, to support this institute. And then the third and an innovative part of the celebration was that we were also celebrating our future. The future hasn't happened, but we can see the future through what we do today and how we plan ahead. So the question was, where do we go from here? What is our orientation for the future? And all that was built into the celebration of the 50th anniversary. Next slide, please. So we did have some challenges. And in the first instance, we had the challenge of how do we engage such a diverse group of people that we intended to engage? First and foremost, let me say IITA is not only based in one location. Our headquarters is in it's also the center for our West African hub. But we have 3 other hubs in the Central Africa region, in the East Africa region, and in the Southern Africa region. And each of these hubs operates as an entity with facilities and scientists and partners. So we wanted to make sure the celebration cuts across the entire institution. So that was a huge organization challenge. We also wanted to make sure that the celebration was at a very high level and moving all the way down to the category of people we deal with. We had huge challenge in terms of protocol and organizing. How do we bring all these people together and make sure that it all comes together effectively? Then we had to also look at the issue of media. How do we get a good media coverage? Because we really believe it's important in these sort of organizations to have a solid media platform that helps to carry the message beyond just there. And the fourth key challenge, of course, was a budget challenge. We really didn't want to make use of research money to fund the celebration. So we needed to come up with other ways of generating money to help us carry through this enterprise. Next slide. So the first thing we decided was that communication was going to be the central instrument to be used. So our communication team at headquarters had to get to work, and they had to link up with the communication teams at all the hubs. So we had to set up a virtual community of practice for the communication group. They met regularly, right from the beginning of the process, to really be central in the planning and the execution of the celebration. We also had to set up a multi-tiered committee, multi-tiered in the sense that it actually involved the top management dealing with issues of planning. We also had a logistics group within the, handling the day-to-day challenges of how we actually make things happen. And then for the alumni, we decided to have a parallel event, which is the alumni event, the 7th alumni reunion event, running in parallel during that same week of the celebration, which started on the 24th of July all the way to the 29th of July. Next slide. In terms of the media engagement, one very innovative step we took was to have a presence with the Nigeria Stock Exchange. You know, they have this tradition of having the closing bell sounded, and IITA was invited, you know, to the Nigeria Stock Exchange that week and closing bell. But prior to that, we had to do a press conference, and this was attended by a number of press houses, both within Lagos and from other parts of the country. And they then basically engaged with us to be able to ensure that they have the central message and help us to get that message across. And the sounding of the closing bell was also an instrument to bring our message to a category of people that normally would not be dealing with agricultural research. And these were the corporates, you know, the businesses, and you know, and we can already see the beneficiary aspects, you know, of that. Next slide. So, what were some of the outcomes? I think one of the key success factors, which we can say, is just the attendance list. We really managed to get the top cream of who we were expecting to have. We had people ranging all the way from presidents. We had 3 presidents of countries. We had ministers. We had ambassadors coming all the way from Japan, from Belgium, Burundi, and a whole range of other countries. We had private sector moguls who came from various private sector firms, including 2 of the most significant private sector firms, you know, within Africa. And we definitely had increased exposure and visibility. The media coverage was outstanding, and I'll say something short. And then we also had to embark on non-traditional sources of support, and that included even raising contributions from staff, as well as from alumni, as well as from board, and also contacting the corporate partners who have been directly engaged. So we did have some support from the Institute, but we were able to raise a significant amount of support through these non-traditional sources, and that was very helpful for us. Next slide. So this just shows the main event on the 24th of July, where we had the high-level celebration, and it had so many different elements to it, and all of which added to the color of the celebration, and was a great hallmark. We had, standing on the left side, we have President Obasanjo, who we also brought on as a key champion. He is an individual with a lot of political clout, with a lot of political presence, a lot of, you know, networks at a very high level. We had the president of Nigeria, who was the president at the time the institute was created. President Gowon was there. We had the president of the African Development Bank, Dr. Akin Adesina, he was there. The president of Nigeria himself was represented by the Federal Minister of Agriculture. And as I said, we have a whole host of other dignitaries, and we made use of our communication skills to make sure that it all ties together appropriately. And we have the next slide. Okay, that just shows us the media activity during the first 2 days, the 2 days when we had the high-level event. And as you can see, we had over 100 stories in 2 days. If you look at the general average, those 2 days really peaked quite significantly. We had over 75 media houses on the event and sending out stories in both print and radio, television, and in there. Let's have the next slide. Social media was also very strong there. And we could also see the presence of, likes, the number of tweets. And we had a whole team of people who were managing social media. And this included our youth agripreneurs who worked very closely with our communication unit and made sure that there was a lot of information shared through social media. And that was also seen as a very significant success of the event. Next slide. So how do we know that we were successful? We can say we were successful because our goals and objectives were met. In a number of cases, we can say our goals were actually exceeded. As I've already said, we had good participation. Our main conference center normally holds about 400 people, but this time we had to have an overflow tent with a capacity of 500, and both were full, and very good screens, video screens in every corner, and the communication links were very active. We had enhanced visibility and reputation for IITA, mainly through the media presence, but also through individuals basically sharing information on what was. But one key thing is that the morale among staff and partners was so much a result of this. People felt proud being part of the organization, and that explains why individuals were giving freely of their services, of their resources, etc., just to make sure that we had a good celebration. IITA is well prepared as a result of this, and we have planned a 2-day conference from the 24th to the 25th of November, basically just to focus on food security futures. We're looking at the next 50-year cycle and addressing the issue of what do we need to do today as we move towards that period. So that will be, and we use this celebration on the 24th of July to make that knowledge available to people. Next slide. So that's about it. It's an event that we are all very proud of. We had a huge challenge, and we were able to do it within budget. Our strategy was, to be people who could pay for themselves to pay for themselves. And then we raise funds from people who would wish, to give something. And of course, we made sure that in terms of management of the finances, things were very tight. And our communication pool was very active and helped to get the information out, helped to develop the template for the celebration, the banners and the colors and everything that was done in the celebration itself. So we are looking forward to November, when we will have the final conference, which will project us to the next 50-year cycle. The picture on your screen just shows the emphasis we are putting on youth. In looking at the next 50-year cycle, we believe it is very important that youth are central. And so our youth agripreneur program is going to be a core part of our business moving forward. Thank you. That's all I have for now.
Excellent, Kwesi. It's interesting. I totally agree on the youth, and we'll come back to that in some of the next presentations on how to engage youth and the different projects that we could do as examples. Also interesting to see how you measured success through objective figures. Thank you very much, Kwesi. We'll come back with some questions for you at the end of the presentations. You can go on mute if you please, and thank you for your presentation. And Wakira, you're up next, my dear. And Wakira is joining us from Nairobi, from Kenya. She works at the World Agroforestry Center, ICRAF, in Nairobi, where she is responsible for managing social media and website content, and started her career as an IT generalist before settling for web and content development. So you upgraded from IT to web and content development, and also has a passion for market insights and consumer behavior. And take it away, the next 10 minutes is yours.
Okay, thank you, Peter, and thank you very much, Kwesi, for that presentation. ICRAF turns 40 next year, and we could really use some of those insights So my presentation is about our comms efforts for a 2-day virtual seminar that took place during this year's International Day of Forests and World Water Day, which fall back to back. I'll start with some background information about the virtual seminar. Charles, if you could go to the next slide. All right, so the seminar was a 2-day event of 3 hours each and was spun off a recent and very interesting study whose authors, 21 of them, suggest that the conversation on the connection between trees, forests, and climate as it is now needs to change because the current climate policy seems to focus mainly on the role of trees in terms of carbon measures, while overlooking the direct effects that trees have on the climate through other factors such as rainfall and cooling. So the virtual seminar was organized under the umbrella of the CGIAR's research program on forests, trees, and agroforestry, of which both C4 and ICRAF are part of, and was coordinated from 2 locations, one in Bogor and in Nairobi, and both locations had live audiences. The seminar had 11 speakers in total, some of whom were authors of the study. And I must admit that when I saw the number of speakers in the diverse locations where they were connecting from, I had my doubts and wondered whether the gods of technology, as Peter calls them, would shine some extra bandwidth on us. The long and short of the connection aspect was that it worked well, and we can give it a 90% scoring on connectivity because we had the usual online connectivity issues. The connection was via Adobe Connect, and the seminar was streamed on YouTube. With that background information, we set up a communications plan with various components lined up from our end at ICRAF. We produced 2 blogs, a pre-event blog that pretty much weighed the understandings of the study. Charles, if you could go to the next slide. So as I was saying, so we produced 2 blogs, one as a pre-event blog and another one as a post-event blog with information about the symposium and most importantly, the call to action that was agreed upon by the participants at the end of the symposium. So other than the blogs, we had a social media strategy for the symposium. First, we identified a main hashtag to use in all our posts, which would eventually help us measure our efforts on social media. So we used the hashtag trees are cool as the main hashtag and also included International Day of Forests and World Water Day hashtags to tap into the massive reach that these 2 days influence. The social media messages were designed in 4 parts or elements to include introductory posts that we linked to the first blog, the introductory blog, and also we linked those to an events landing page on the website that carried details of the symposium. We also had facts about the connection between forests and water and rainfall using Did You Know posts. And these posts, as we all know, they are always very helpful to build the momentum of events and also to thread hashtags. During the event itself, we had we sent out live tweets from our main Twitter handle at ICRAF, and also we had C4 sending live tweeting from their main hashtag. So we also had post-event messages that linked into the post-event blog and also to the study paper and the symposium's recordings. we also had a video of one of the authors of the scientific study that we posted on YouTube and also on Facebook. Next slide. So for the outcome on Facebook, we had a reach of about 22,000 and a habitat of 551. That is people who shared and commented and interacted with our posts. I know Peter would disown me if I didn't talk about Peter as a survivor of one of his intense yet very helpful social media boot camps. So on LinkedIn, we had a reach of about 6,000 and a total reaction or habitat of 85. Next slide. So on Twitter, we had a total of 593 tweets that went out with the hashtag trees are cool, with a total impression of about 4.8 million. These tweets were sent to about 900,000 unique accounts, and we measured this using an online tool called hashtracking.com. As for the video, the YouTube stream attracted 546 views, and we also had a video, and the video of the interview with the scientist attracted 539 views, both on YouTube and on Facebook. Next slide. So we also had a number of media coverage. The blogs were picked up by Reuters and Farming Online UK and by allafrica.com. Now we have, we picked this story because we felt that our event, which was the symposium, which was a very short event, and being our first virtual seminar that we've ever did, achieved quite a lot in terms of reach, and especially with the pre-event activities in terms of reach. It also set us up for other upcoming virtual seminars. As a matter of fact, our Science Week started today and is virtual, and we are hoping that we are going to have another success virtual meeting. So thank you very much for organizing this, Peter.
Thank you, and another example of an outreach program, this time from ICRAF. Thank you for sharing, Anne. You can go back on mute. Callum, if you can unmute your audio. You're up next. Callum McKeegan is the publication officer at the European Plant Science Organization, EPSO, and is a global coordinator of the Fascination of Plants Day, a global celebration of plant science that reaches all continents. He is the chair of the communications for the Marie Curie Alumni Association and was on the steering committee of the Science March in Brussels. And Callum holds a PhD in microbiology. Callum, it's all yours for the next 10 minutes. Go ahead. And you need to unmute. Let me see. Callum, are you online? Callum, I see you're unmuted, but I don't have any audio from you. Callum, I have no audio from you. Karam, I don't get any audio from you. What I would suggest is that we move over to Elizabeth Sharma. Karam, once you're back, please drop in because I don't have any audio from you. Just a second. Yeah, go ahead, Karam. I think I hear you. Karam, could you reconnect, Karam? We'll move over with this, and then I'll pick back up with you. If you could reconnect and give me a sign when you're on. Liz, if you could unmute. I see you coming in. Thank you. We're moving over to Elizabeth Sharma, who's a senior associate at Marshmont Communications, a boutique communications agency specializing in global development issues. She has managed the account for the Sustainable Agriculture Coalition called Farming First for 4 years. In 2016, Farming First Story of Agriculture and Sustainable Development Goals won 2 industry awards for non-profit communications. The next 10 minutes is yours, Liz. Please take it away.
Thanks very much, Peter. It's great to be able to chat to you all this afternoon. Could I have my first slide, please? So yeah, my name is Liz Sharma, and just to give you a quick overview of who Marchmont is, we work with clients specialising in global development issues, as Peter mentioned. Next slide, please. These are just an example of a few of the clients that we work with. I'm sure that you recognise a lot of them, lots of CG centres there, the University of Cambridge, and I'm here to talk to you today about Farming First, which I'm sure a lot of you have already heard of. Next slide. So Farming First, as Peter mentioned, who are they? Well, they are a coalition. They're not an organisation of themselves. We're an amalgamation of lots of different actors all along the agri-food value chain. And we were set up to give these people, so from farmers to scientists to engineers, business and NGO, to give them a communications and advocacy platform from which they could all speak with one voice. So we do 2 creative campaigns a year, as well as maintaining their social media channels. That's some of our vital stats down there at the bottom. And as Peter mentioned, one of the topics that we're best known for in the last couple of years is demonstrating the role of agriculture in the Sustainable Development Goals conversation and demonstrating why agriculture is important for that. Next slide, please. So this year, Farming First wanted to engage around that topic once again because the high-level political forum is happening in New York, that was going to be tracking the progress of the Sustainable Development Goals. So every time we approach a campaign for a client, we have this 12-step process that we go through with them at Marchmont Communications that really helps us unpick what kind of campaign we need to produce in order to deliver on the objectives that they have. So I'll just walk you through that very quickly. And the first part is purpose and context. Now, it seems obvious, but you'd be surprised at how many people launch into doing communications campaigns without really strongly articulating what the objectives are of that exact campaign. Who are the audiences that you want to reach? What is it that you want that audience to actually do with the information you're giving them? And finally, a really important one, this is something that Kathy mentioned, what are the trends that are currently shaping the environment that you're communicating into? Are they going to be perceptive to the messages that you're promoting? And if not, how can you get around that? So it's only really by answering these first questions that you can start to move to the second stage, which is the insights that those answers will have given you into how you can plan your campaign. So hopefully those answers will help guide you formulate messages that are actually going to resonate with the audiences that you have articulated. If you know how you want your audience to behave, what that behavior change is that you're trying to create, you can then identify the evidence that's going to persuade them to behave them in that way. And then finally, the creative ideas and the actual strategy, because it's not always the same. It's not always going to be media. It's not always going to be digital. It's not always going to be an internal communications campaign. Once you have the answers to those sections in question 1, you can start to think about how you can plan in a way that's going to be effective. And finally, delivering on that. So what needs to be done by who, how much money do you have to do it, and how are you going to track it? Next slide, please. So that brings us to what we did for this campaign this year. So here are kind of fleshed out those objectives and audiences and what we wanted them to do in the case of this particular campaign for Farming First. So we knew that we wanted to make sure that agriculture was front of mind for people discussing the SDGs and making sure that they knew that it was it played a really important role, not just in SDG 2, but across many of the SDGs. We wanted to show that progress was being made because that's what the meeting in New York at the UN was going to be about. So we wanted to be providing people the evidence to show that this was working. And finally, we also exist to promote the achievements of our supporters. We've got over 180 organisations doing fantastic work, and we're sort of a shop window for them. So whatever campaign we came up with, we wanted to make sure that it was going to be showcasing what Farming First supporters are doing to promote the cause. And in terms of audience, it's not just the high-level influences at the UN. We also wanted to reach the development community, but not just those involved in agriculture, those involved in other development sectors as well. Do they know how agriculture can also advance the goals that they're working on? And in terms of what we wanted them to think, feel, and do, well, we don't just want to spew out information. We want to equip people to become advocates themselves, to go out there into their own networks and share interesting information. So that brings us on to how we move from context to insight there. So in terms of context, we looked at what was already being done about the SDGs, in particular SDG 2. And we discovered that a lot of the work that was being done was focused on a goal level. There was very little that was actually being discussed in terms of drilling down into the 5 targets. And that's really important if we want people to be sharing information that's going to help the SDGs be met, because this is one of the ways they're going to be measured. So the insight we took from that was, okay, so what we will do, which is unique to what anyone else is doing, is we will create a campaign that focuses on the 5 targets of SDG 2. Secondly, we realised that we'd already done quite a bit of work on the SDGs, particularly SDG 2, as had a lot of others. So we knew that whatever content we came up with, it needed to be different and creative in order to kind of catch people's attention. And finally, there wasn't going to be a big news moment that was going to be an obvious hook for our campaign, even though the HLPF was happening. It wasn't a huge event on people's calendars. So the way around that we decided was to partner with a relevant event that was happening at the same time in New York, which was Agriculture and Food Day, and we became their official social media partner. So that really helped us get our content and our campaign in front of all the people who we knew would be receptive to it and who we would want to reach with it. Next slide, please. So this is the campaign that we ended up with, based on all of that context and insight. This is how we decided to deliver it. We created the SDG 2 countdown campaign, in which we explored 5 SDG 2 targets over a space of 5 weeks. So in the first week, we released a lot of content about SDG 2.5, which was all about protecting genetic diversity. The following week, we moved on to SDG 2.4, and so on. So content was drip-fed throughout those 5 weeks, and then culminated with all the information and resources being available on Agriculture and Food Day. So the idea of using a countdown concept was helping us convey the urgency that time was passing, progress was being made, but also the framework of discussing a different target throughout a different week also gave other organisations the opportunity to crowd in their own content. So, for example, we did call outs to promote the fact that this is what we would be doing. So then anybody working on biodiversity, for example, in the first week was able to share their content and their knowledge as well, using our hashtag and crowding into our campaign. So in terms of the content that we produced that we knew we needed to make different and exciting, every week we launched the same set of collateral. It had different colours, a different colour scheme for each target so that people could feel the content was fresh and new every week. We're well known for doing infographics, but we wanted to do something different this time. So instead of simply publishing an infographic each week, we published a quiz that was released on a Monday. And then all the facts that were the answers to those quizzes were released on the Thursday. So you could see how well you'd done. And there was a countdown on the Farming First homepage as to when that infographic would be available. That worked really well because the gamification aspect behind that really encouraged kind of participation and conversation on Twitter, with people challenging people to kind of beat their scores. And then we usually see social media traffic dropping off towards the end of the week. So the fact that we were then publishing something new on the Thursday really meant that we had an extra boost of activity as well when the infographic was shared. We also compiled Farming First TV interviews, which were called SDG2 in 2 minutes, where we spoke to really important stakeholders. That's from the World Food Programme featured there. And again, there was a countdown on the screen for the 2 minutes that they were discussing, why that particular target was important and how their organisation was helping to achieve it. So it was educational, but it also gave those people content that they could share on their own networks. So Roger Thoreau, for example, who was the author of the First 1,000 Days, did a video about nutrition that was then posted on his own blog. So we were really equipping people with content that they could take out and share in their own ways as well. We also had a made for social video that kind of united the campaign. It's had 1,500 views to date, and it really that's what brought out the message of the fact that agriculture is important to many of the SDGs, not just SDG 2. Next slide, please. And this is just a snapshot of the work that we did at Agriculture and Food Day. As I mentioned, we were the official social media partner, and by the time this rolled around in mid-July, we already had all of the content available on the Farming First website, so we were able to use this as a moment to drive everybody at that event to this page. Our hashtag #AgForSDGs was the official hashtag for the event as well. We created social media quote cards that, as you can see with this example from Farah, people were then able to share on their own channels using our hashtag. And we also did a set of polls as well, gauging people's reaction to different questions that were going to be addressed in the breakout sessions at the event. Next slide, please. So just a few of the outcomes that we saw from this. In terms of the use of the hashtag, over 1,200 accounts were using it. Our retweets increased over 500%. We had some really nice engagement from people like SDSN and One International there, as well as the high-level people we were hoping to reach, such as the DG of FAO, who were all engaging with our hashtag and our content. The campaign videos were viewed 4,500 times. We were embedding them directly into Twitter, so they were on autoplay, which we have found as being a really successful way of getting more views than simply putting them on YouTube. So another important aspect that we saw was that people were spending longer on the site because we had created so much in-depth content that the time spent on the site increased by nearly 50 seconds, which we were very pleased with. So all in all, that's how we were able to create something that was different and unique for 2017 over a topic that we have covered in the past. So I think I'm out of time as well, so that's my last slide. So yeah, thank you very much.
Liz, and a remark for everyone, there's a lot of data on the slides. As the presenters only have 10-minute slots to present their project, we will also distribute the presentations after the webinar itself. So you can go through some of the figures and some of the strategies as you look back again at the recording of the webinar. Let me have a look. Callum, are you back online, and is your audio working now, Callum? No, same problem. You're unmuted. Colin, can you do me a favor? Can you look at the settings, the gear wheel on the right-hand side, and see that your microphone is still on the right device? Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have any audio from you. I see you're unmuted, but I don't have any audio. No, unfortunately, I don't. Kind of what you might do is try to debug the audio. You can do it live. So when I hear you coming in, I'll put you in as the next presenter. Sorry about that. Um, Thanks again, Liz. Interesting also, just like with the other presenters, you have some objective figures that you use to measure your success. We'll come back to that in the Q&A. Boris, you're up next. I see your video on. Don't forget to unmute your audio. Boris Arantaza is a forest engineer working as an independent advisor to the Slovenia Forest Service. His main occupation is working on international projects where he manages and takes part of the communication, takes part in communication, dissemination, and outreach activities. He's an active blogger and an online and offline editor. He is going to present the recipe for success on their communications campaign for the European Forum on Urban Forestry in 2016 in Slovenia. Go ahead, Boris, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Peter. I can hear myself. Is that, yeah, okay, now it's good. So I will present, if you can go back, yes, this experience we had with the European Forum on Urban Forestry. So it happened in Ljubljana, which at the time was the European Green Capital. And this is why we had a bit of a bigger agenda that would usually be in place for such an event. So it happened at the Ljubljana Castle, which you can see on the photo. So next slide, please. Our objective was twofold. So to bring the international audience to the forum and also to bring the forum to an international audience. So what this means is the first part of our campaign was mostly marketing, and then the second part was dissemination of what is actually happening at the forum. Next slide. So when I was put in charge of this communications effort, I drew inspiration mostly from Peter, so from his Forests to 2015 social media bootcamp. We tried to replicate that. And then I also had some experience in blogging and social media and with leading volunteer teams to draw upon. Next slide. So the idea was to form this hashtag IFUF 2016 communications team, and this would be a volunteer communication / social media team that would promote this forum. It would be a multi-disciplinary, multi-institutional, and it would consist of people from different generations. So there would be a lot of sharing and positive learning, forgiving atmosphere. Peter. Next slide, sorry. So we had basically three types of roles in this team. One was the manager / motivator, that was me. Then we had professionals and employees from the Slovenia Forestry Institute and Forest Service, which were pretty hard to get to basically give us their free time. So we had to do a lot of scouting, pitching, and then also getting permission from their bosses so they could participate in these projects. And then the third group were the students, which we basically used traditional ways to attract. So by presentations, mailing lists of societies and stuff like that. Next slide. So this is one of the first photos of our team. Next. This was our communication strategy. It looks a bit funny like this. So if you want to find out more about it, please go to my blog. It's outlined there in pretty much details. So it's hard to get people to volunteer their time for such a project. It's also lots of man hours. So we did what we offered these volunteers in compensation is knowledge and experience. So we did seminars on how to write a good blog post. We did workshops and also tutoring on using social media tools. We taught people how to edit photos, and during the process, they learned to pick up effective and strategic communications, so that they would know how to reach goal with their goals. This is the external infrastructure, so it's pretty much the same as in other projects. So let's just go to the next slide. A key feature were blogs. So we did three types of blogs. The first type is blogs from the communications team. So these were basically promotional blogs about the technical aspects of the forum. And then the second type of blog that was really successful were blogs by keynote speakers, which were basically used to attract participants to the conference. And then the third type were the blogs for the blog competition. So you may go ahead, yeah. So this is one of our banners. Next slide. So the promotional campaign was actually successful. It achieved its goal. We had 12 blog posts in the competition. You can see the numbers there. And we had over 80 participants from all continents at the forum. So basically, we made this European forum global. We had maybe 30 more than we expected, and this was, we considered our goal reached. Next. So this is our winner, Peter Fieringa. You can see the title of the blog on the presentation. And it's a really good one. It could go into like a big magazine or something. So if you get the time, you should read it. Next. So then the second part is bringing the forum to a global audience when it's happening. So we had this social media team of maybe 8 people, something like that, and we did live tweeting from each presentation. So at least one person was at each presentation tweeting and taking photos. So we put photos on Flickr right after the sessions. The content was constantly shared on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Blog posts and daily newsletters were sent out at the end of each day to allow people who weren't there to stay in touch with the proceedings of the forum. Next. So there in the back row are the members of the social media team, tweeting away, taking photos. Yeah, it's okay. Next. And this is the Twitter full screen, which actually is really good if you want to like boost the online dimension of your conference or event. Okay, next one. So these are our numbers. They might not be the biggest, but I'm very proud of this comment. This Philip Rothbell is an urban forestry expert and a well-known one from the USA, and he couldn't come, and he told us basically that he could still be there in spirit because of our work. Next. So this is our social media / communications team. At the end, we felt like winners. Yeah, next one. You can read more. You will get the presentation. I think I wrote extensively about it. So yeah, next. And you can also ask me personally. Thank you.
Boris, a good example of a conference with a social media twist to it, Boris. And we have some questions coming in for you already. So
Hi,
be really
Peter, excuse me. This is
Go ahead.
Charles. So somehow my PowerPoint presentation went on automatic advance. I don't know how I didn't touch it. So that's why I took it down. I'm going to have to figure out the problem. Can you just wait 1 second?
Sure.
That's why it kept advancing when I didn't want it to.
Yeah.
Just 1 second.
Yeah, no problem, Charles. Meanwhile, let me check if I have Callum online. Callum? I still can't hear Callum. Just a second. Let me check. Callum, I see you unmuted, Callum, while Charles is getting the slides back up. Callum, can you double check on the settings again and try the other one? It's strange because in the test it worked so perfectly. Meanwhile, Camilla, if you can prepare, if Callum doesn't come through with the audio, we'll move over to you, Camilla. Are you online, Camilla?
Yes, I am.
Okay, excellent, Camilla. Thank you. Just a second. While Charles is putting the slides back up.
Can you see it?
Yeah, I have Camilla ready with her slide. Thanks, Charles. So,
Okay.
Callum, any audio from you? No, I don't hear Callum. Camilla, we'll move over to you. And I hear Callum testing his audio. Camilla, we're over to you. Talking about the connectivity challenges, we tried for about an hour and a half to get Camilla well connected. So she's actually connected through the phone. Camilla Vogt is a research fellow at the Charles Stewart University based in Laos, PDR. With a background in agriculture and natural resource management. Her current research focuses, and also her day job, is the investigation of soil and water management strategies to shift from the monoculture of rice production to dry season field horticultural crops within the lowland system of Cambodia and Laos. Since her work began within the R4D context 5 years ago, she has seen traditional methods and tools of extension, such as farmer field days, pamphlets, booklets, rolled out again and again, with very little uptake of technologies that result from various projects. As such, she and her colleagues devised an edutainment program of clowns and magic to be performed in schools in the hope of reaching family members often not involved in the research or extension process. But who nonetheless play an important role in the terms of receiving and communicating information, such as children, and household decision-making, such as women. I can hear you online, so Camilla, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Peter, and thanks for inviting me to join this discussion today. In that short bio, you pretty much presented everything I needed to say, but I'll try and elaborate on that somehow. Like Peter said, I am a research scientist and have only been working in the research for development context for the last 5 years. In here, in Laos and in Cambodia. But from what I have seen through this current project and the last project and other projects that I've been working on, is that communications are often the last thing on any researcher's mind, and if you don't have a strong strategy from the outset, then it's unlikely that all of the hard work that you've been doing over the last 3 or 4 years is ever going to have an impact on the farmer and the smallholder. So, like Peter said, I've been thinking about this over the last 5 years, and it just so happened that I have a neighbour who is a clown, and he has been doing similar sorts of things in East Timor. Basically, the performance that was developed over there was promoting peace, love, and harmony. So agriculture is a little bit different. But he has been he met with some local students from the National University here in Laos, and they formed a group, and we approached them when we received some money from the Australian Centre for International Agriculture, Agricultural Research, to run this show. So they are the major producers. We have to acknowledge their contribution. But the students at Barney got together are all involved in research, rural and community development here in Laos. So the skills that they're learning through this process, it will also benefit them in their future careers. Next slide. So one of the major aims and objectives of this particular event was to diversify smallholder livelihood strategies, moving from the monoculture of wet season rice production in the lowlands to post-rice crops and non-rice crops, field crops, horticultural crops. We also wanted to reach the family members not often involved in the research and extension process. Here in Laos, when you organise a research and extension workshop or a farmer field day, it's often only the men that turn up. In Cambodia, it's a bit different. But we know that women in the household often make a lot of decisions, and they're often the ones burdened with the household chores, including the gathering of water from the the local well, which might be 1 or 2 kilometres away. The children are also often involved in these processes, and they could, they're often required to be at home to help around the house and in the garden rather than go to school. We also wanted to connect the broader agricultural community by creating an event where we could attract not only children and women, but we also wanted farmers, local technical officers, private sector stakeholders. Who else did we want? We basically wanted everybody across the value chain and get them all together in one point so they could start talking. If they saw something that they had an interest in, then they could go and approach the person there to see how they could go about implementing this in their particular system. We also know that, like most people in life, and particularly here in Laos, they love a good laugh. So we thought we could use clowns and magic and humour as a means to transfer this information. And I agree with everything that is said, particularly Kwesi, that we want to focus on the youth. And I'm a big believer in that because, they're the ones who are the future, and they're often the ones who take up the technologies first. I know that when for instance, at our shows, every second kid had a mobile phone and was recording the event. So you presumably think that they would take that home and show the family members. We also know that they're very strong. There's a very strong community in the rural youth on Facebook, etc. So not so much for the average farmer, the parents. They're still, using the old Nokias, although I hear they're coming back. But yeah, we just wanted to create, if the parents weren't there for the show, we wanted the kids to go home and relay that message, even if it was just like, guess what, Mum, this is what I heard today. And then that might pique the mother's interest, and she would then go seeking information from other villages, etc., etc., etc. But we also wanted to maximise project resources across a number of different ACR initiatives. And this was an amalgamation of 3 ACR projects and 3 key broad message. Well, there were a number of broad messages. We also got involved with, if we go to the next slide, please, Charles. I'm looking at the wrong thing. So these were our other partners in this. We had the Crawford Fund, which is a philanthropic organisation from Australia who have a focus on training, and they have some very, they have some very, well, what's the word? They have some good people leading and coordinating the training efforts in country, they work all over the place. They work in Africa, they work in Asia. But they're generally academics or industry leaders who have had many, many years' experience, and they do a lot of good work. We're also connected with other DFAT-funded initiatives that have been operating in Laos over the last 5 years, DFAT being the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Australia, because they had certain packages and components within their program that we were missing as agricultural technical specialists. So one of the big things about this is that we can't go producing or promoting an agricultural commodity or practice if the farmer cannot gain access to finance. So basically SPSL and GIZ had already developed a financial literacy package that we were able to roll out as part of our program. If you go to the next slide. please. The key common messages from these were improved input fertiliser input management, non-rice crops for dry season production, and the importance of crop rotation for preventing pest and disease, etc., or reducing the risk of. Animal feed and sources, residues and forages, mechanised dry direct seeding, pest and weed management, and financial literacy. You can see there that's an image at one of the schools that we rolled it out in, and you can see the level of participation that the students were willing, they wanted to be part of the show, essentially. If we go to the next slide. These are our target villages in Champasak province, which is the most southern province in Laos, and where a lot of the, the funding, often the development aid and development funding often doesn't get to because it's so far away. If we go to the next slide. We did our own little impact and evaluation of the event just to gauge how we went and also to feed back to the clowns themselves so they can improve their next performance. Over 3 days, we were in 3 villages and reached over 1,000 students, teachers, village chiefs, etc., etc., etc. The clowns formed their amateur clown group, Maha Hahe, and they've since gone on to continue the work and have been approached by others to develop similar programs, one of which is being delivered tonight, and that focuses on women and water management here in Laos. We also had a day in between where the clowns worked with youth in the local area who'd been working with the NGO Well Concern already, doing sort of community theatre type stuff, but mostly related to human trafficking. So this was a little bit lighter in terms of the whole thing, and they got a bit more, I mean, I guess, they got developed some skills themselves. If we go to the next slide. One of the best things was that there was greater sharing of information resources across projects and between government offices, and everybody was very pleased to get on board with this, including the education department. They thought it was great. We also had some tablets, and we used an online sort of system to get our mobile equated data to gather some general information about ag-related stuff and general M&E of the event. That was just an opportunistic thing. It wasn't essentially designed with any great experimental design behind it. We just wanted to know how we went. We did a survey immediately following the show, and then we did one a month later to see whether any of our messages got to the broader community. Next slide. 50% of the respondents indicated that it was entertaining and informative. 42% of the parents received at least part of the message, and 10% indicated that a greater integration of music and a sing-along would be good. Lao people love a good sing-along if they can. Next slide, please. Sources of information. So this has been aggregated. This is only the parents, not the children. I wanted to find out where they got most of their information from, and as indicated, more than about 50% got their information still from TV and radio, and other farmers was probably there. The DAFO is the local technical staff in green there, in light green. I think maybe that's just because they thought that that's what they had to say because they were talking to government staff. So you'd have to do a whole social network analysis to confirm any of that. Next slide, please. Challenges that we face, know your audience. So as we went along, some of our Lao colleagues wanted to include more and more technical detail. And the whole idea was really just to get people in one place at one time, to give them a broad sense of what is available to them, what are their opportunities. So if one thing I learned from that is just keep it simple, and don't try and include too much technical detail. Also, we need adequate sound gear. We didn't quite expect to have so many people at these events, so we'd have to get that sorted for the next time. And also, we had the show professionally filmed, and when I had it translated into English for the subtitles, I realised that there are a few things that were not technically on point. So it'd be a good idea not to rely on others to get the technical aspects correct. And I think that's my last slide. Yeah, that's my last slide. So overall, I think it went down really well, and that we're probably going to reproduce it. And it was a great experience. So thank you for your time.
Excellent, Camilla. I have a couple of questions which came in via Skype. You want to reconnect when we do the Q&A, or you want to take your questions now?
I can reconnect for the Q&A later on.
Okay, excellent. No problem then, Camilla. Thanks again for patching in via telephone. Thanks, Camilla. Catch you in the Q&A.
Bye.
All right. Callum is still working with Callum offline to debug his audio. He's trying to reconnect. So we are going to really challenge the gods of connectivity right now, because we're switching over to Australia. Alpha, if you could unmute audio and video. Alpha Senan, the two next speakers, Alpha Senan and Mahesh Chander, are actually sitting next to each other. They're attending a conference in Australia, so they're huddling the Wi-Fi hub at the moment. I see Alpha is coming in. Alpha Senan is the first of the twins, the Tribagonian and Indian twins. So Alpha Senan is a Tribagonian farmerpreneur, a motivational speaker, and an agri-youth advocate. Alpha is the founder of YFarm, the abbreviation of We Help Youth Farm, a globally recognized and award-winning nonprofit organization established to creatively promote agriculture among children by increasing their awareness of the world's food problems, and by doing so grow the future feeders of 2050. We're going back to the SDGs. In 2015, Alpha, being discontented with the lack of growth and support for youth and agriculture sector, started a mission to reposition and rebrand the agriculture industry through its through his invention, AgriMan, or as Alpha will say, AgriMan, the world's first and only superhero for food and nutrition security. AgriMan is part of a tangible, on-the-ground engagement campaign that teaches children the importance of food production, and how they can contribute towards achieving food and nutritional security. YFarm has since been launched in 9 countries worldwide, including 5 countries in Africa. From Australia, our Tribagonian Alpha, go ahead, and don't forget to unmute your audio.
Yeah, I am on. All right, thank you, Peter.
Go ahead.
All right, so thank you, Peter. Pleasure to be here. So the pit here, I'm going to take you all through a journey of the process that I have been through with YFarm. Can you put it back to the first slide, please, Charles? Yeah. So when we look at this photo here, I have a dream. You know, my dream is for every boy and girl, man and woman, to have this happy face on a farm. This is me here in my dashing bush farm in Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm smiling, I'm happy, I'm excited, I'm passionate about what I'm doing in the pit here. So, but my journey and my story didn't start here. So I grew up on this same farm. I hated it. I really hated being there. I hated when my father would call me to come out on the farm to do work, well, to help him, you know, and it was very, very, you know, not attractive, not cool to me. So as I traveled throughout life and went on to university and whatnot, something sort of brought me back to this place. And this place where I am now in this picture here, and I'm now smiling. So we could move to the next slide. So what I did, I realized that something is wrong and something is missing with the way in which we approach and the way in which we engage, the way in which we educate young people in agriculture. So in 2015, I founded this non-profit organization, an NGO called YFarm, which means We Help Youth Farm. And interestingly enough, with the name Y, One of the speakers before was mentioning the importance of always acknowledging why in what you are doing. So one of the major things, one of the major gaps which I realize is missing is the why in farming and why we should farm, why we should get young people to farm, and making young people understand why it is important. The next slide will help us with proving to them why. So, as we know, presently we are in year 2017, and the average age of farmers in most countries is 55. Even being here in Australia for the past week or so, I realized that the average age of our farmer is 65. So when we look at the year 2050, what will happen to these 55-year-old farmers? Clearly, they would be deceased. Now, when we look at 30-year-olds, for example, my age, for the very few people who are farming, like myself, at this age, by the year 2050, we would love to be retired, somewhere in Hawaii, relaxing. And when we look at the 10-year-olds now, the question mark there is before, what are they thinking about? But they are the young professionals by the year 2050, and they are the ones that is expected to be feeding us. But the big question is, or the big challenge is, who will feed this 9 billion population by 2050? Next slide. And so it goes back now to the 10-year-olds today. What careers are these 10-year-olds thinking about? You name it, engineer, doctor, lawyer, pilot. So studies have proven that there's a steady decrease in youth in agricultural participation. Not only studies, but also, every day we notice that young people are migrating from rural to urban. There's agricultural productivity is decreasing in some places. And we realize at YFAM that something must be done about this. How do we get agriculture in the brain of this 10-year-old? Because remember, they are the ones to feed us in the future. Next slide. So we realize that in order to do this, to increase youth participation in agriculture, we must make agriculture. We must speak their language. We must communicate with them in a manner that they understand. We must educate them in a manner that they are actually willing to listen. So what we did at YFAM is that we engaged different audiences in understanding and understanding the culture of what could cause this rebranding. And then I want to go to the next slide, take you back to something which allowed me to get to this point of helping reach and achieving this objective. So I remember the story of Captain Planet, being a hero. And, he was really able, for me as a child, he was able to help me be environmentally aware, not litter, not waste the water. So then I realized that something like this, in my quest to figure out, what would get youths to think about agriculture as agriculture, I realized that there must be an adventure to encourage youth in agriculture, starting with a main character who's branded as the world's most powerful food provider. Next slide. And this is when we introduce the first and the only food and nutrition security superhero in the world, called Agri-Man. So Agri-Man would tell the boys and the girls this: boys and girls, I'm the Agri-Man. To feed the world is my master plan. If you plant one tree, you can eat for free. This will guarantee us food security. And just like that, using poetry, using theater, using music, we would deliver performances to these young children. However, what is important is that Agri-Man doesn't only tell them to farm, to plant one tree. Agri-Man advocates for them to eat local, to make sure they cause zero wastage. And he tells them to be rice-sponsible. What is rice-sponsible? Not wasting one grain of rice. And of course, eating healthy and issues with the environment. So, understanding climate change. Our major challenge for me was that, we can't wait until university to now teach children about food security. And I always say we can't wait until, you get a PhD to understand climate change adaptability. We must start from way before when to really get the young people to understand this. And, really thinking about it, during the age of 7 to 11 is when children are most receptive to change. This is the age when kids want to make up their mind with what they want to be. And we are competing with television shows, showing us that the doctor is the savior in society, right? The pilot, the policeman is the person to be. Yes, they are. But we don't have any marketing online, campaigns on TV, music that advocates that the farmer is a hero. The farmer is the person to become. So we are trying to catch that at a very early age using our tool, AgriMan Adventures. Next slide. So when we think about AgriMan and its position as a superhero, is really a matter of reality versus fiction. And the powers that we are given to AgriMan is powers that young children, boys and girls, can actually relate to. Now, interestingly enough, when we first launched AgriMan in 2015, questions came in from all around the world, where is AgriWoman? So what we did is that we conducted a camp, and we got kids to come together and come up with a name for a female character and a drawing for her. And most people never would guess what name they came up with. So I will just share it right away because I can't hear you anyhow. But they came up with Photosynthesis, and she's now being designed. And you can move to the next slide. She's now being designed by a really international artist. We got some funding to design her, and we're going to introduce her into our comics. So this year now, you'll see that we use comics to relate our stories. So no longer could we go to these children and go with this big textbook and preach to them about, how we would do other subjects. It's boring. So our methodology is agri-edutainment, which is agricultural, educational, entertainment, to engage, to inspire, to motivate these young children. And these boxes, which you see here, it's boxes made of pallet sticks, and we call it a self-grew box. They can, grow it for themselves, build the boxes for themselves, grow it for themselves, take a selfie with it, and eat whatever they grow in the box for themselves. Next slide. And we have kids joining our AgriMan fan club globally. And this is how we keep engaging and keep inspiring these children to become our future feeders. We say that everyone has the ability to contribute towards food and nutrition security. That's by simply making one decision not to waste any food. Next slide. So, of course, AgriMan would go around to schools. He would do performances. He would do, using the fan club, birthday parties. And then most times when AgriMan go to schools, the children would ask their teachers to come on the farm to actually grow food at AgriMan. So this is when we actually take it to the next level. So this picture shows a young student. As I said, we tackle that very infantile age, that very young age, to position agriculture or agriculture in their minds. And so at this, they are on our farm where we would actually facilitate a lot of trainings. Now, we were able to launch in many different countries within the space of 1 year. You could move on. And people all around the world, asked us to become partners, to participate with what we have been doing to promote agriculture, because everywhere is the problem. And the problem is that, how do we create youth engagement? And at YFAM, we say the problem is the solution. The solution is to creatively engage youth. And there we simply have it using Agriman. We are creatively engaging youth. So this is our YFAM ambassador in Haiti, who is presenting Agriman to the students in a camp. Next slide. And here we have Agriman being colored by a young child in Zambia. That is another one of our branch. Next slide. And this is Agriman in Cameroon, where we partner with the YPAD of Cameroon to deliver seminars, to deliver workshops, to facilitate trainings. And they are so much very excited. On the slideshow here, they are looking at the Agriman Adventures comic, a motion comic that they can look at online. And we get people to help with translating it into the respective language, and it has really been kicking off as a worldwide movement, and we never really saw that coming. We launched in this tiny island in Trinidad and Tobago, and even I'm right now in Australia, promoting Agriman in schools in Australia right now. Next slide. And then these are just some pictures of, these are, to the picture to the left are some children in South Africa. They drew some characters and sent it to us. They drew an Agri boy, Agri girl, and some twins. And we capture all these stories and try to put it into our comic edition. To the right, we have someone from Belgium who, she got an Agriman activity book and she colored it. And so this is how we engage these children through color, through creativity, and through the arts. Next slide. This here now is like someone else in Belgium. This is the Thought for Food founder, Christy. Some of you may know her, and her children reading Agriman Adventures. And I wanted to share this here as things like this really, brings motivation to us. We would see this posted on Facebook, and we'd see such a simple idea that people are now sharing this dream and adopting it and sharing it with their children worldwide. Next slide. So many people ask me, many friends, so I want to give some little bit of advice now and sort of how I did it and how we overcome, or how we actually continuing to innovate. Many people ask me, how did you do it? So this is a piece of advice here now, is to find the I in your idea. And this is what we were able to do with the idea of a superhero character to engage young people in agriculture. And then I would always say, find a you in your uniqueness. And moving on to the next slide, I would always ask persons, are you one in a million? And then most people would say yes. And then I would say, you shouldn't be 1 in a million. You should be 1 in 7.3 billion. And this is me. This is some of the creative things that I would do via social media to engage audiences and to have them let's think differently, to give them a laugh about agriculture. Yes, this is funny. Me with maybe a 25-pound planting bunch on my head that I planted for myself and I harvested. And, people told me maybe I could come out with the carnival band using plantains and as a costume. And, while it may be a good laugh, it may also be inspiration and motivation to just think differently about the way we see agriculture. So it's really rebranding that culture of agriculture, but more so rebranding the way in which it's marketed. Next slide. So then I always say, don't deny your idea of possibly changing the world, nor allow the world to change your idea. Why? Because when we launched in 2015, it was at the World Food Day celebration in my sister Isle, Tobago. And the moment Agriman came out in the costume, we had senior people, laughing like, ha ha ha, is that Ninja Turtle? Ha ha ha, who's that? And we couldn't let that stop us. That very same day, many kids came to our stall. Next slide. Many kids came to our stall and they didn't want to leave. They came and bought comics and whatnot. So we realized that we owe on to something. Now, another piece of advice here now, this is 4 ships which I follow. and it have proven to be quite influential and quite beneficial. So we say that there's mentorship, right, which is the first ship, and that leads to entrepreneurship, leadership, and then partnership. And our favorite statements at YFAM is collaboration, not competition, complementing, not reinventing. And don't reinvent the wheel, make it spin. So these are very, very powerful tools, always building our networks, partnering with persons. We may not have a dollar for what we are doing, but what we have is passion. What we have is getting other people passionate as well to partner with us and just to see this dream and to follow this dream of making Agriman bigger than Superman, bigger than Spider-Man one day. Next slide. So they're innovators. I think maybe my final message to you is break the rules. Do not let the rules break you. And that is very important. Very, very, very important. That's for our young audience there who's listening. Break the rules, do not let the rules break you. Next slide. So quickly, this here is our position today. Like, why youth? So youth opens up the horizon through imagination, and vision. We create opportunity, and entrepreneurship. What is entrepreneurship? Innovation and entrepreneurship. Many people have innovative ideas, but they are not entrepreneurial about it. So what we did at YFAM with our innovation of Agriman, we could have just come up with a superhero, and then it's just in our back pockets. It's just in theory. No, we became entrepreneurial about it, to apply it, to impact society, and to really grow future feeders and to rebrand agriculture. And of course, through my fancy term here, leadership, which is really leadership. And of course, the creator, farmerpreneur, which is a farming entrepreneur for the 21st century. Next slide. And these are, the first day which Agriman launched, and this is the look on the children's faces. So I always go back to this bit here to resonate, why we started, what's our key purpose, what's our key meaning, and why we doing what we're doing. Some days are good, some days are bad. Some days are positive, some days are negative. But, we always have to keep on and remember that we have a world to feed in 2050. And these very sad children are the ones to feed us. And we can't wait till they become 2 years old to now try to grab them back into agriculture. That's too late. So that's the same mistake we've been making forever and ever. And YFAM don't intend to make that mistake twice. Next slide. So our story is local, but our mission is global. And, as I said before, we have been launching in different countries. We intend to get Agriman in every globe, every continent, every country, on every TV in years to come. And while traveling to Australia, I met this random person on the plane, and he was telling me that Agriman is needed in every continent. And I never thought about it like that before. And he was really convinced, So these are the things that people share with you as well, and sharing your dream and sharing your passion that helps you to keep being motivated. Next slide. Right, so that brings me to the end. I hope I am in good time. So thank you very much. Help us feed the future. And as Agriman would say, plant one tree you can eat for free. This will guarantee us food security. Thank you.
And it brings out the musician again, Alpha, in you, the rhyming, and really interesting. There's quite a bit of remarks coming in via the chat channel for you, amongst others, people asking for your contact, and we will share the email contacts for the speakers. Sorry, of the speakers, from the speakers, with the audience. Thanks, Alpha. We'll come back to you with some questions. If you can switch seats, I know that Mahesh is sitting next to you. Mahesh, you can get ready. Meanwhile, we just do a sound check. It looks like Callum is back. Callum, can you give me an audio check?
I am here. I hope you can hear me.
Oh, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Thank you. Good.
Okay, stay. Don't touch anything. Don't touch that button again. I will first do Mahesh because he's ready up there in Australia, and then we'll switch back to you. Is that okay?
Great. I look forward to it.
Okay, excellent. Thanks. Don't touch anything. All right. Charles, we continue in the sequence, and after Mahesh will take a column on. All right. Thanks, Charles. We're staying in Australia right now. Alpha and Mahesh have become twins glued to the same computer. Dr. Mahesh Chander is a PhD in agriculture extension education and is currently a principal scientist and head of the division of extension education at IICAR's Indian Veterinary Research Institute. He has been actively associated with research, teaching, training, extension, and development activities concerning agriculture extension education for over 25 years. He has guided nearly 30 master's and doctoral students. He is a social media enthusiast. There we go, a scientist and a social media enthusiast. They don't come very often like that. He's using Facebook, WhatsApp extensively, has written blogs for GFAR, Wipeout, IISA, and GFRAS. Given his engagement with social media, recently he has been asked to coordinate the social media activities of his organization. Mahesh, it's all over to you. The next 10 minutes is your slot.
Hi, Peter. Hello. Good afternoon.
Go ahead, you're on.
Hello. Yeah, actually, let me have the first slide. Next one. So I'm a scientist, and you know what scientists do. They mostly do conduct research, write research papers. Only a few read these research papers, very limited audience. Public at large don't know what we do and write. We wish our work known to many. That is, everyone desires that what we are doing and what research we are conducting, it should be known to many people. But we want to be known widely, but don't know how. Social media offers wonderful platform to spread the word quickly and to larger audience. Less is more here. This is what I have realized by my experience. We don't have to write much, but we can make it known to many people if we are using social media. Blogs are more widely read than academic journals. Thankfully, scientists now recognize the potential of social media. Big majority yet to know its potential. What I have seen scientists around me, my colleagues, and largely they don't know. And sometimes they make fun of us that we are too much into social media. And at the same time, they also feel that they should too be known to many people because of their work put up in some platform which is accessible to many people at a very short time. And social media provide this opportunity. Next slide, please. May I have next slide? So what happened, till 2011, I was also a typical scientist, shying away from social media. And 2011, I joined Facebook. And then onwards, Facebook, it was for general wall, personal wall, meant only for my friends and families. But 2012 onwards, what I felt that these personal groups does not serve my purpose. So I joined also many professional groups on agricultural extension, like agriculture extension in India, agriculture extension in South Asia, then GFRA social Facebook group. Likewise, there are many professional groups which I started joining in to share professional content. And in 2013, first blog for IISA I wrote, this was not exactly blog, it was more of an article. It was academic kind of an article. And then blog is a bit different. This I came to know only in 2014 when blogging competition was launched at the World Conference on Agroforestry in 2014. And thanks to Peter for the blog tips. When I started searching how blogs should be written, and I searched online and I found very good article by Peter on blog tips. Then how blogs can be a personal narration and written in a very interesting manner so that we can retain the interest of the readers, unlike the article, which are quite often monotonous. So then what happened? Then that 2014 was very important time for me. And Then when I started writing more often for GFAR, then YPAD, then I saw now I keep on writing and some blogs for GFRAS as well. Then in 2016, I started exploring what are the other platforms, social media platforms, where I can put on my content. Then I found WhatsApp groups. Then I joined these, including the farmers groups and many WhatsApp groups. Quickly, we are sharing many information. And then this transaction cost is very little. And we are sharing a lot of information, making ourselves aware. And what we know, we are making it known to others. What others know, we are knowing what they know through these platforms. So now I am admin of several Facebook groups and active in WhatsApp. And my social media updates are eagerly awaited by what I know by many scientists, students, farmers, and many other stakeholders. So they look forward for what I'm putting in. Sometime maybe some success stories, case studies, likewise. So now what I feel that I'm able to reach in comparison to many of my colleagues, to more people far and wide than what I could reach through my research papers. Of course, research papers have their own values, but in a simple language, if many people know our research, they can also assist us, they can also contribute their ideas. Next slide, please. So again, this is a certificate. It was a big motivation for me. Again, I'm coming back to this World Conference on Agroforestry 2014, where I was one of the 5 top winners for the blog, wherein I had put in 2 blogs, and then it was an interesting experience. I can't forget this experience, and I'm again thankful to Peter for bringing before me this excellent opportunity. May I have next slide? So I am an established social media user now. Scientists and extensionists recognize and try to follow me. I guided one PhD thesis recently on social media application, and that student of mine was also he participated in a youth agripreneur project by GFAR, and he scored very good boards, and his project was appreciated by many. Similarly, he continued on that work and submitted PhD thesis. And then I coordinate social media activities at my institute to improve visibility of the work scientists are doing. Now, fortunately, my organization, Indian Council of Agricultural Research, Ministry of Agriculture, Government of India, in general, they appreciate social media use for promotion of agricultural information. And then I got invited to lecture on social media because through social media, now people are coming to know that I do have deep interest in social media. I'm being invited for lecturing in different platforms. I'm known in scientific, academic, and professional circles, thanks to, again, to social media. My self-esteem is up and feel more confident now. My social media engagement has been professionally rewarding to me. Social media drives me to work more and profile success stories of farmers. This blogging is my profession. Blogging is my passion, in fact. I like blogging too much. Next, please. So being active in social media is a challenge also. It's very easy saying than being in social media, being active in social media. We need to be creative to sustain interest. We should be engaged in activities worth sharing. Sometimes many people get depressed because of the social media, because they don't have something worthwhile to share, something interesting to be shared with many people. They feel what to share. So far, we have to create content. We have to create stories, interesting stories, by doing interesting work so that we can find something to share. Many people don't have this thing. That is why they are not as successful in social media. We need to be alert all the time. We have to keep on monitoring the content, what is going on there, and we have to look into it, what is being shared, and what is the response, what is the feedback to what we are sharing. We should be aware of social media do's and don'ts. It is very important. Many people don't know what they should do and what they shouldn't in online media. So you can master social media to do even better. So it is very important how we can do well in social media we have to learn it. So we have to learn it and we have to master it. So I wish all of you good luck for good use of social media for the professional development, for the personal development, for the agricultural development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mahesh. It's nice to see how you evolved. I remember when we met the first time in 2014, when you were ending up in the top 5 for our blogging competition in the run up to the conference, and how you evolved. So we have some questions coming in for you. So if you can mute for the time, Mahesh, and I think we have Callum back. Callum, can I get an audio check from you?
Hello?
Yeah, I got you.
Can you hear me? Great.
Okay, Callum, the last son. Alpha and Mahesh, can you guys stay online because I have some questions for you guys. Charles is spinning back the presentation to your slide, Callum. There we go. We're all ready. Callum, our last son, the next 10 minutes is yours.
Great. Thanks for waiting for me. So I'm going to talk about the Fascination of Plants Day, which is an initiative that's set up by the organization I work for, which is the European Plant Science Organization. We're based in Brussels, and we have over 200 members who are academic research institutes and universities. And I've acted as a global coordinator for the Fascination of Plants Day, which is our big outreach activity. So the next slide. So the question that was asked in one of the EPSO general meetings was how can our organization as scientists, as academics, engage the public in plant science, as it's often so hard, where scientists are often hidden away in laboratories. So the decision was to create a day, which is now the 18th of May, to invite the public at large into their institutes to see what they're doing, to speak to them in person, to interact with them, to engage with them and talk about their research. So if we skip the next 2 slides here. So the goal of the Fascination of Plants Day is to get as many people as possible around the world fascinated, enthused by the importance of plant science for agriculture. And this theme is really broad. We've had 4 editions now, and we've never defined a specific theme. This is plant science for agriculture, but also in sustainability, horticulture, forestry, plants for non-food products as well, environmental conservation. So all kinds of messages. So the people that get involved are very broad. So we never theme the day itself. So if we go to the next slide, and the next 2 actually. Yeah, so we encourage our event organizers to open their doors to the public and we really put the emphasis on interactive, educational based activities for the general public. And of course, this started off at plant science institutions and universities, but it's grown to include farmers, botanic gardens, museums, schools and companies. And it's also outgrown Europe as well. This is now a global event, and we have over 50 countries involved. So the aim is, of course, to build an effective communication channel between the scientists and other stakeholders with society. Also, to speak about their jobs as scientists or in agricultural research or in different settings, and to generate a social awareness for plant science and put that on a level that people can interact with. So if we go to the next slide. So yeah, this has now been adopted by over 50 countries across the world in the last one that we had in May. Our ambition is to turn the world green, get as many people organizing events across the world as possible. So I can even see there's 1 or 2 countries there that aren't colored in. So these are countries that have held events during the duration of the fascination of plants day, going back to 2012. So I'm going to talk about how we've done that at a global level. We have a small team that does the global coordination. So if we go to the next slide, yeah, we can see here that the first event took place on the 18th of May 2012, and there were hundreds of events involved. I think it was 500 or 600. Then the second one, 2013, there were over 1,000 events, and then since then we've held it every 2 years because it grew so large that we didn't have the resources to do it every year. So every oddly numbered year, so it's taking place now 2013, 2015, 2017, and the next one will be 2019. We hold the official Fascination of Plants Day, and then on the oddly numbered years, we encourage people to hold events, but we don't have a global coordination. So here we can see that we're quite a small team in the European and global coordination of that. We're only 4 people, and none of us do that full time. But what we do is manage and contact a network of national coordinators, and they are the real key to this. They are the people that disseminating the information in their own countries, getting involved, their own networks, and getting in touch with the event organizers, who then generate the events in their local area and the visitors in person. And also we've now got a good social media activity as well. So if we go to the next slide. So as I said, our global coordination team is very small, but as we recruit and communicate with the national coordinators, we also have a graphic designer, and until recently we've had a webmaster. We now are looking for a new one. If we'll have the call very soon if anyone knows someone who may be interested. So we contract these roles. The graphic designer has been brilliant for us. We've got a great visual identity which people love to use, which I think is another key to the project. And the webmaster links everyone together through the website. So this network of national coordinators, both in Europe and now globally, it's actually over 50 globally. They're recruited from academia on a voluntary basis, and they're the real key to the success of what we've had with the Fascination of Plants Day. They adapt the material into their national languages and to their culture, and disseminate the information to their national institutions and the network of event organizers which we've got over time. And it's really this network which has enabled us to grow the day itself. So if we go to the next slide. Another important aspect has been the Fascination of Plants Day website. So here we have a PR toolbox with all the images, the logos, the posters, all available to download and can be edited to translate into the national languages. And then all events are uploaded onto the pages, the national pages, so we can keep track of everything that's happening around the world. There's also presentations, PowerPoint presentations translated into the very relevant national languages on why study plants. So there's the PowerPoint presentation is available in 18 languages, and there's various images and materials there to download. If we go to the next slide, so this is the impact of kind of activating this network of people. In 2012, where we had this global coordination activity for the first time, we had between 500 and 600 events. In 2013, that's gone up to over 1,000. In 2014, we encouraged events by themselves, but not so many. 2015, again, nearly 1,000. And then we're still getting the final number for 2017, but it will be again over 1,000. So it's been a very time-effective and cost-effective way to generate a lot of interest in plant science. If we go to the next slide. So this is what happened across the world in 2017. So at the moment we've counted about 1,020 events in 52 different countries, which is fantastic. Poland has been an absolute leader. They've got over 275. And I won't go into any detail on the specific events, but we had a greenhouse erected outside the Dutch Parliament for 2 days. We had the Kew Gardens released the State of the World Plants report, which got national media coverage in the UK. In 2015, we're invited to the expo in Milano to have a day there in the city. So it's really become a successful and global event. So if we go to the next slide. Also this year, we had 31 events broadcast online on what was started called Botany Live. So someone in the UK proposed that people would broadcast events through Periscope and Facebook. And on the next slide, you'll see a little bit more about that. So you can see in the picture someone performing a microscopy experiment and then someone broadcasting that. So we had 31 events broadcast. All the videos many of the videos are still available. We also had a great online response. So people using the hashtag Plant Day. I think we had over 6 million potential accounts reached. So and over 5,000 people using that hashtag on the day itself. So and people were sharing all kinds of things, photos of plants, why they love to study plants, what they're interested in, what events were going on, photos of events. Also journals, scientific journals started quizzes and all different. We had a plant science panel where people could ask questions online as well. So the online aspect we've been developing, and we hope will again in the next edition be even bigger. And we hope that also many of you can share your own projects to the hashtag on the day itself in 2019. So if we go to the next slide, you'd be very welcome to read our success story documents. The 2017 version will go up on the website shortly, which gives some more information on the events which were held in each country, which I don't have time to talk about. And if we go to the next slide, I would just like to say thank you to you all for listening. And if you have any questions or want to get involved in some way, my email address is there and I'll write it in the chat as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks, excellent, Kellerman, and I'm glad that we got your audio debugged. We're also sharing the. That was a crusade. Huh? You would think he's living next door here in Brussels, and he was the one with the most challenges. Must be the Scottish part of it.
Thank you very much, Peter.
All right, Callum, I will catch you in the Q&A in just 7 minutes. Charles, I'll give you a little bit of time. Woo, you're fast. Charles is fast. He's already ready with my presentation. So I have somewhere the honor of presenting myself. For those who don't know me, I'm an online media consultant, and I only work for nonprofit organizations. Most of them are active in food security, nutrition, ecosystems, agriculture. And I love to hang out in places and spaces where few have gone before. I love to experiment on the edge of things of what is possible. I always try to do it for the greater good. One of the examples I wanted to give of where I try to use communications to transcend communications, using communications and outreach projects for the concrete better. I think very often as communicators, we kind of stick traditionally to being a pure advocates. We're bringing messages from others. But what would happen if we actually try to make our own project born out of a communications project and a communications team? So I would like to present shortly our YAP program, YAP Youth Agripreneurs Project. Next slide, Charles. We're talking about 18 months ago. We were in the run-up to a global conference on agriculture research for development, GFAR 3. This was a GFAR event organized in Johannesburg, and as many of you have already faced the challenge of how do you build up an online momentum before the event itself. So we thought of innovative ways to increase our audience and visibility in the run-up to the event, but we also wanted to use that opportunity for a meaningful change. And we wanted to pilot test a project which went purely beyond communications. So in the work that GFAR does, we are convinced, as many of you have already mentioned this, that youth are the future of agriculture. For us, it's simple. No youth, no farmers, no food. And as Alpha has also mentioned, if we look at the average age of a farmer towards 2050, we're going to be in big trouble if we don't involve youth in agriculture. We also believe that entrepreneurship, as Christy has mentioned, is key to show profitability and attractiveness of agriculture to youth. If they see a business in it, a financial benefit, they will engage in agriculture. So we also saw that youth very often only need a small push, a financial incentive to get going. And very often it lacks them the bit of cash to actually convert their initial ideas, project ideas, into a project. So what we did is we wanted to try a small tryout project to use it as a showcase. We wanted to show both organizations and youth what is possible, what the potential is. So we designed a project where we would do a public call to young agripreneurs to submit a project. Every single project would be published on our blog as an individual blog post. And we would follow a selection process to choose 6 champion projects. Each of these projects we would provide with a seed fund of $5,000. And in cooperation with YPart, we would provide a 1-year-long intensive mentoring and training support so they could succeed in the project. Next slide, Charles. Time was against us. The conference was in April. We got the final approval to kick off the project end of January. So only end of January, we did a call for sponsors. There was no budget in our communications budget to cater for the UP program. So in 14 days, we called towards sponsors, and luckily, in about 2 weeks, FAO, IIIT, Agropolis Foundation, Side Platform, and 2 private donors came forward to fund the seed funds for these young entrepreneurs. So after we secured the funding, we did a call for submissions, which was 2 weeks later after the call for funding. We did a call for submissions to the public. We started to distribute it. And we thought, okay, if this is going to go well, probably we're going to have 50, 60 submissions in the next 3 weeks where the competition would be open. But in the first days, indeed, we received 1, then 3, then 5 submissions of young agripreneurs projects. But then the flood started to come in with about 10 to 20 submissions per day. Each of those submissions had to be published within 24 hours after we received it. So in the end, we had 3 full-time editors spending 24 hours per day to screen and publish each of those entries. The call for submissions was only open for 3 weeks. So the first selection of the top 30 entries was based on the amount of views and the amount of comments that each individual blog post, each individual project entry received on their blog post. So we did this so that we could encourage each submitter to reach out to their own network and kind of market their competition entry, their project entry, so that these, not only the outreach, but also so that these comments could actually instill a meaningful discussion between the one who submitted the entry and people who are interested via the comment section on each of the entries blog post. So after 3 weeks, when we closed the submission of calls, the jury then selected the top 6 of the 30 most popular submissions. Once selected, then these 6 finalists were invited to join us in Johannesburg at the event to start their 1-year long training and mentoring program, during which they would regularly report on their progress with an internal report and a public blog post every 2 months. Next slide, Charles. So these are our young 6 young finalists who, with YPart, we mentored in their agripreneur project over the period of 1 year. And the projects varied from using indigenous gear cow to breed a climate-resilient dairy cow breed, to introducing unemployed Ethiopian youth to beekeeping, or to design a simple mechanical device to separate weevils from rice in the Philippines. Next slide, Charles. And I'll give a link to all of the up entries at the end of the presentation. Now, why do we consider this project successful? First of all, of course, we were able to identify 6 young champion youth who were, after 1 year of mentoring, not only successful in their project, but also were working as ambassadors for youth and youth in agriculture in different other projects. And that, of course, was the main purpose of our project, is to find and showcase how youth and how young agripreneurs are inventive, are creative. But if you look back from the communications perspective, we received much more submissions than what we had expected. Next bullet point, Charles. We actually received 428 different submissions in just 3 weeks' time. But even better, because the first public voting was done through the comments, the amount of comments and the amount of views that each of these blog posts had, we had 372,000 page views within the period of 3 weeks where these projects were submitted. And we had a total in 3 weeks' time, a total of 64,000 comments. In 3 weeks' time. For anybody who's managing a blog, these are massive amounts. Imagine you also have to screen all of those comments, get the spam out, etc. So 64,000 comments in 3 weeks' time. Now, the audience we reached also showed an increase in our longer-term blog public. We were talking previously in one of the presentations how to convert a peak activity, as you have with a conference or an event, how you convert this into a long-term impact in your communications outreach. What we saw, for instance, is that the blog subscribers went up with a tenfold. And looking at the longer-term statistics, this project clearly injected a new audience into our blog, a new life in our blog. And the returning audience, even after the project, even 18 months after this project, is still 10 times higher in terms of views, in terms of returning visitors. So that is a longer-term impact that it has on our communications channels, the blog. It's also interesting to note that even today, these individual projects, these submissions, and the bi-monthly progress reports from the app finalists are still 8 out of the 10 most read blog posts, even 18 months after the project. Now, even more importantly, 18 months after this project, we still have about 30 to 60 comments per month coming in on these submissions. So there is still quite a bit of a conversation going on between the people who have submitted those projects and the online public, who keep on asking questions, giving hints. And as such, it was really encouraging for us to notice that so many youth who submitted the project, even those who did not end up as a finalist, wrote to us afterwards saying we had no idea that we could use a blog or social media in this way to publish what we want to do or what we're working on, but also to network. many of them found actually fellow agripreneurs they did their project with. They could network with them, build coalitions with them. Some of them found individual donors for their projects, and 3 projects actually found international volunteers to come over and physically help them with their project to realize their project. So it goes much further than just the final 6 agripreneurs that we selected to be mentored. So to encourage this networking with agripreneurs, we also formed a YAP Google group, which is an online discussion platform, which is still active today. Actually, those youth themselves who are member of the YAP Google group then started a WhatsApp group, and Mahesh mentioned the use of WhatsApp in our environment. So they actually organize regular online presentations like mini webinars on WhatsApp just by themselves. They are no longer mentored, they organize themselves. So that really shows for me the power of youth and communications, but also beyond the power of youth and the creativity in agriculture and networking. Next one, Charles. If you want to have a look at all of the submissions and the bi-monthly reports from our finalists, this is the URL. Voila. I'm switching back again hats from presenter to moderator. I have a couple of questions. Katherine, if you could unmute for your one of the questions I have for you. Katherine, do I have you?
I am here.
She's here. Katherine, one question came in. Could you give a little bit more explanation about BuzzSum? You mentioned a tool called BuzzSum and people were interested. Can I get a 60 seconds reply from you?
Sure. BuzzSumo is a marketing analytics tool. It can tell you, I pay $99 a month. I got $50 off. So now I think I pay $49 being a nonprofit. And that's for 5 users. It gives me trends on content. I can check key influencers. I can create shared lists to see what my top content is. I can search on, top trends on certain content themes. So I use it for all those things. It can do Facebook Analyzer and others. I don't use it as much for that.
Okay. So it is a tool basically to track your outreach.
Sure. Other competitors are like Meltwater. I think there's like a Ninja, another tool called Ninja. There's a lot of different marketing analytics tools out there. And what I would do is suggest find the best marketing analytics tool that would be good for your use case. Use free trial options and then decide. You don't have to just use BuzzSumo.
Yeah. Okay, very good. It would be good in the wrap-up, Katherine, if maybe we can send a URL to the participants of BuzzSum. Thanks. Christy, I'm linking up with you. Christy, if you could unmute for a second. You mentioned do I have your line, Christy?
Yes, you do. I hope so.
Yes, I hear you. Christy, I had 2 questions for you, but linking up with BuzzSum, what Katherine has mentioned, you mentioned as part of your evaluation tools to measure the success of your event. You mentioned Meltwater. Can you give us 60 seconds introduction as to what Meltwater is and what it is used for?
Yeah, this is basically a tool to help us evaluate the social media postings coming online. And this was directly worked on by our communication group. And we can send, very further specifics on that. I don't have all the technical information on how that was actually handled, but it helped us to know, how the postings are coming in, and also to keep track of various media postings coming as a result of the initiative, and we were able to see just the intensity. One interesting dimension was that it wasn't just local media. As a matter of fact, we had more international stories than the local stories, and this tool helped us to be able to monitor, that reality.
Yeah. Very good. I will also send the link to Meltwater in the wrap-up email. Chrissy, I'm staying with you with one question. Please, Michael, Victor said, one of the key tips that he had in his experience is don't ask for permission, but rather ask for forgiveness if that is needed. Could you give us the event that you organized was a multi-platform? It was quite large. It had a significant budget. Could you give us one key tip you would want to give to our audience? One key tip on organizing events like you did for IIT at 50.
Yeah, I would say one key tip is really involvement. You really have to figure out how to engage people and let people become part of the whole process. It's not about you telling people all the time what is going to happen, but really about generating interest and giving a platform for people to express themselves. And related to that, we found it most valuable to have a major champion with political gravitas, whose presence alone generates warmth. And in that, we had a former president of Nigeria, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, who is also the chair of the Zero Hunger Forum in Nigeria. And at the same time, he is the IITA ambassador, international ambassador for IITA. And he was our link pin in making sure that we were connected to the powers in high places. So I found that as really important in an initiative like this.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Kwesi. I'll switch over to Anne. And I think there were in the chat channel, there were some answers you wanted to give. So I'll give the floor over to you, Anne. Can I see you unmuting? Kwesi, we can mute you again. Let me see, Anne, are you back? And Wakira? I don't see Anne. Liz, I have one for you. Could I have you unmuted, Liz?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. Liz, question for you that came in via Skype. Could you give me the longer-term spin-off for the event? So we're all trying to create a peak around an event or around the project. But from all of the efforts that you did and all of the multiple mini projects that you did within this larger scale project, what did you have as longer-term spin-off and how did you measure that?
Sorry, I'm not sure of the question, Peter. Longer term
spin-off.
Following on from the event.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, of course. So there was a wrap-up report of the event that was done that Farming First shared on their social media, and I can see what you mean. The case of there being a big explosion of activity and then that kind of quietening down post-event. Basically, what we kind of enabled ourselves to do is that content can then still be drip-fed following on from the event and able to recycle it when new moments come. For example, in September now, the SDGs are turning 2 years old. So it's giving us another excuse to recycle that content in a different way on social media. So that's one of the things that we always try and do to kind of give longevity to the content that we produce so that it doesn't feel kind of dated and old. So we now have a sustainable development goals portal on the Farming First website where all of our content on that topic sits. So we're continually updating it and directing people to it. So everyone can still access the content, including the quiz, taking the quizzes and things like that, even though the project is over.
Okay, very good. I had another question for you, just a second. If meanwhile I could ask Alpha and Mahesh to unmute, because the next one is would be for you guys. Liz, another question and remark that came in. Your project was around SDG 2. So the question would be, what would you see as the main challenge to be able to convert a pretty conceptual thing like the SDGs or SDG 2 into practicalities through your communications projects?
That's a great question, and I think that it builds on what we kind of saw as the insight that, you know, there was a lot of work existing on the kind of goal level and less existing on the kind of target level. So we tried to take things a level deeper and to be kind of go into more detail about that. And again, with us, a lot of our work is exactly that, trying to show the actual work that's happening on the ground. So that's where all the content from our supporters came in, because they're the ones who are doing this work on the ground that we wanted to showcase. So we did that in a lot of ways. We had blog posts coming in from them that were posted in the appropriate week that were talking about the specific programs that they were running, like reviving traditional crops in Senegal, for example, and making a business out of that. We tried as much as possible to place those case study stories in the media as well, in places like DevX and Zilliant, that regularly publish content on those kind of topics. We also did a range of social media graphics that had concrete stats in from project results. So we had lots of kind of pictures of farmers with comments on them of how they've managed to become more resilient or raise their yields, or lots of examples like that our supporters were then able to share. And then, of course, the videos as well were interviews with experts, but the topics we were covering in that SDG 2 in 2 minutes was very, very succinctly, what is this target and how is your organization helping to meet it? So we sort of were able to create this kind of range of educational tools that really focused on work that was happening on the ground that, you know, Farming First itself wasn't carrying out, but we were kind of crowdsourcing and then providing a platform for it to be shared.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Liz. Alpha and
Peter,
Mahesh. Go ahead, Kwesi.
Sorry, Peter. This is Kwesi. Can I just make a quick point on what
Sure.
Liz has just said? I would like to suggest that one of the key things you could do through this webinar series is to focus on that question that Liz raised, the fact that they see a lot of progress being made at the goal level, and yet when you get to the target on the ground level, it's pretty difficult. And I think the basic question is, what do we need to do to resolve that? Because if that is not resolved, we will hear a lot of broad talking and things in relation to SDG 2, and yet nobody is looking at the implementation and the achievement of the targets. So there may be certain strategies which are already going on in other places, and it might be a good area for us to focus on in a
Yeah. Okay, Kwesi. I took a note. That is something indeed that we might look at, because many of the audience is actually working on agriculture development, agriculture research, food security. So we're all somewhere involved directly, most of us directly or indirectly, with the SDG 2. So how can we transition from working at the goal level to actual implementation and achievement of the targets? And how can communications actually help in that? So I took a note of this for one of our webinars. Thanks for the introduction, Kwesi. Alpha and Mahesh, are you guys online?
Yep, we're here.
All right. Alpha, first question for you. That came in. Somebody said, well, I see these self-growing boxes as a practical way where Agriman is encouraging people to hands-on youth, young people, how to get hands-on into growing foods. What other things do you have that using Agriman as a way to make young people enthusiastic? But what do you have as concrete kits that you could give to get them with their hands-on? The self-growing boxes was one. What else do you have, and do you have planned?
Yeah, so one of the other things that immediately jump out that I could share quickly is we have something called a ponics cart, and it's a hydroponic system that we colored and we painted and we put it on wheels, and it's mobile, it's portable, and we grow food in this phonics cart. So what we do is that we do workshops with these kids to get them actually building it themselves, and using PVC, things that they have at home, and very cheap materials to be able to accomplish this. So this is one of the other hands-on activities that these children actually adopt. Some other things would be we don't wait for these children to learn about value chains. So like one of the workshops I conducted in Australia here with the high school is that I allow the children to pick a fruit. And when they pick this fruit, they listed five products that they can make with this fruit, being very imaginative and creative. And I sort of guided them accordingly, and using a Bristol board paper and colors and markers and crayons, they draw the entire value chain of how, when they, from the seed of this fruit straight until the product that they want to make. And they were able to, after the fact, then I told them, this is the agricultural value chain. So then they were able to understand now the different things along this value chain. For example, the STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and the arts required along each part of this value chain to actually come up with this product. So then they can now think differently, like, wow, I didn't think about it that way. So those are some simple ways and very catchy ways that we get them to think differently about, adopting agriculture.
Okay, very good, thanks. And the aquaponics kit is actually small enough that people could almost install it on their balcony, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah, and you saw it when you were on my farm, Peter. Yeah, it's small enough that it can be in their garage, in their balcony, in the hallway, so it doesn't require much space. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Alpha. I'm switching over to the young man next to you, Mahesh. Some questions came in about WhatsApp. You said I'm active on Facebook, I'm blogging. I'm also active in WhatsApp, and most of the time people see WhatsApp as a way to communicate one-on-one. So can you give me a short example as to how WhatsApp is being used typically? And also, what's the difference, people ask, between WhatsApp versus blogs? Has it a different purpose? Has it a different audience? Go ahead, Mahesh.
Yeah, actually, WhatsApp, we are having one WhatsApp group at my institute with which scientists and the farmers are they are the participants, and many farmers are posing questions. They want solutions. Say, for example, they will take a picture of a crop, disease plant, or animal suffering from some disease or some symptoms showing it. They take picture and send us, and we are able to provide them some solutions. And then this is a transaction cost of delivery of information, and also cost of giving advice to the farmers. It is substantially it is coming down. And also the time lag. If I have to travel to a farmer's place, it will take a lot of time. So, but when we are using WhatsApp, and likewise now what farmers have, they've started sharing information. They are forming several WhatsApp groups have come up, and crop specific groups have also come up. I know I am part of one of the groups, sugarcane. And when I showed the crop in Australia, sugarcane, immediately farmer responded today. He said, sir, this crop looks very poor in comparison to us. Then I told that it is rain-fed, totally dependent. There's no irrigation. And this total farming system is different. So, but then they were happy in a feeling that in Australia, otherwise they had an image that the sugarcane might be so good. But through WhatsApp, when I sent the photo and the farmer could see it, likewise farmers helping each other using WhatsApp group. Suppose a farmer knows something about a new pesticide coming up, a new practice has come, new variety has come in. He is giving information into WhatsApp. Other farmers are knowing about. If they know, no, this, don't try this particular thing. We have tried it, it doesn't work. So their sharing is going on. So this kind of thing now, extension agents are very limited in number, and there is no funding crisis everywhere. It is there. No budget limitation. But WhatsApp is a kind of a solution. And the blog is altogether, this audience is different. WhatsApp is one, and the farmers are not much in blogs. So they want quick remedy to their problems. If you are able to solve, they're happy. And they will not, they are not yet, in my part at least, in blogs. So, but what I feel that some of the farmers, young farmers, those who are much ambitions to make themselves made known, they may come into, but the workshop will remain more popular, is getting popular by the day. So this is what is my experience. And also we have seen farmers are not much active in Facebook group or sharing information comparison to WhatsApp. WhatsApp, blog, Facebook, if we compare, the WhatsApp is the best for the farmers and scientists, agriculture extension scientists versus farmers. So WhatsApp is the best.
There in India, in the geographic area that you work.
So I work in North India. So in that area, this experience is there. It might be a little bit different elsewhere, but what we have experienced is what I'm saying.
Correct, and probably if we can compare one of the geographic areas where, for instance, Facebook is really active, the Facebook community, farmers community is quite active, is Nairobi. So we're switching back again to Anne, who's online.
Producers organizations, especially they are using Facebook group. So there are groups they are using, sharing this Facebook. They are more active into this. Do you have any idea about?
Okay, very good. Thanks, Mahesh. And Alpha, I'm switching over to, you can mute if you please, switching over to Anne. We're coming towards the end of the questions. Anne, we had some questions online. You mentioned in one of the ways that you measure your reach in your projects is using the Facebook Patat. What's a Facebook Patat again?
So Patat means, people talking about this. So, and it's a metric that encompasses a number of things. For example, people who've liked your posts. For example, if you talk about a week, people who've talked about liked your posts within that week, people who have shared your posts, people who have commented on your posts, and the metric measures any account, any number of accounts that has interacted with your post in any kind of way.
So you measure the interaction with not just the views, but the actual interaction with your Facebook postings.
Yeah, the actual interaction, which is probably the most important metric with social media. And somebody also asked about impressions on Twitter. So impressions means the number of times that a tweet has been delivered to users either through either directly or through by them searching, for example, for a particular hashtag, so through search results and all. But of important to note is that getting lots of impressions may not always translate into engagement, because sometimes we have bots sharing your tweets with accounts, and bots may not always have true followers. Mostly are fake followers. So impressions may not always translate into engagements.
Yeah. So, and also with Twitter, you would have a tool which is similar to Patat in Facebook, where you measure the actual engagement, the number of times the link was clicked, or retweet or reply sent to you, the interactions. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Anne. Let me see if Camila is online. I had a question for her. Camila, are you on audio? I know you're watching, but I don't know if you're on audio.
I am now.
Oh, excellent. Thanks, Camila. Camila, there was a question about from our area, agriculture research, we come from the very serious business, and where social media would be frowned upon, let's say 5, 6, 7 years ago, to more of an acceptance. And there comes Camila with the Cloning Around program. So could you give us a little bit of feedback as to how your program and the way that you did it in an unconventional way was perceived by your content owners? The people that actually had the material, let's say the researchers that provided the, let's say the fact base of the the programs you were trying to convey. How did they see that? Michael mentioned, and some others mentioned in the beginning, Mahesh mentioned he was frowned upon when, as a scientist, he started blogging. So I'm really curious to see how your program was perceived by those content owners.
Well, it was very much the same thing. I'm just a researcher on this project, not the project leader, and I've mentioned a couple of things. There was this, and then also engaging with the New Colombo Plan in Australia, which is all about getting the young researchers of Australia mobile in the international development context and getting them over here. And in the early stages of the project, I mentioned these to the seniors, and they weren't really interested in spending much time looking at these avenues. And so I figured, well, I'll just find some alternative sources of funding and do it anyway. And then I'm sure if it's success, then my project leaders and the powers that be are going to like it. So essentially, I just went ahead, found some money, and did it. And you know, we've just had our midterm review, and all of those things were looked very favourably upon by the funding body and also by the midterm reviewers. So hopefully, we have a University of Tasmania student who will be. She's starting to look at this program and a couple of other programs within the region to sort of gauge how it impacts, you know, further down the line. So we'll have some, hopefully we'll have some measures of how successful it was in a couple of years' time.
Yeah, it seems like you've been conspiring with Michael, who said, you know, that don't ask permission, rather for forgiveness if that needs to happen.
Well, the thing is, I didn't know Michael at the time, so obviously we have a similar viewpoint on an approach to life.
Yeah, and it was also resonated, I think, back with Alpha, who said, you know, break the rules, don't let the rules break you. Very good. There was also a question, and we can share some of the links, whether the video you said was the recording of your event. Would that be available online?
Yeah, we have two videos. We have one of the live performance, which really captures the atmosphere that was created within the schools where we were. But it's not that clear. It was filmed by the youth from the World Concern NGO down south, just with some digital SLRs. But then we had it professionally filmed, and will be hopefully sometime before the end of the year. It'll be online in some form or other, and when it's there, I'll forward the links to you.
Excellent. Okay, very good. Thanks, Camila, and thanks again for the efforts of joining in via phone. I have a last question that goes to Callum. Callum, have you touched the buttons yet?
I'm hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, I do. It was a question that came in, Callum, is how come that Poland picked up in the number of events that you have, and is there a way that you can leverage the lessons learned from Poland to the other countries? Because clearly, when you show the figures of the number of events that you had in the different countries, Poland was way up there. So how can you leverage the lessons learned there?
Yeah, that's a great question. They have since the beginning, I believe one of the global coordinators is Polish as well, and they've been involved, I believe, with Vaccination of Plants Day right from the start. And I think they've also managed to get some national funding or some local funding to really help them do it. So this is the big problem in every place, is how to fund your activities. In most places, it's done through volunteers and without much budget. But they've really managed to leverage their network in Poland. They have some very motivated people. Their program, as you saw, had nearly 275 events, I believe, or even as much as that. So I think it's just a great network within their country and between their universities and also support on a local level.
Mm-hmm. So how would you be able to leverage this also with your other countries? Have a rotating basis of the chairman, and you take the next one, take France, and then France picks up an activity?
Yeah, that's a good idea. We obviously brought a Polish person into the global coordination group, and they are now managing the entire of the Eastern Europe segment. In terms of leveraging that, I think the lesson is just find good local people who have a great network, and that's what they have. And if we can find that in other countries, then so much the better.
Yeah, so we want to see all of them at the level of Poland with 300, 400, 500 events.
Hundreds of thousands of events across the world.
All right, very good. Very good. Thanks, Callum. Michael, Victor, and Boris have signed off. They needed to go to a meeting. They already answered most of the questions online in the chat channel. So what we will do, as we're coming at the end of the webinar now, is I'll take a note of all of the questions which were left unanswered, and we'll pass them on amongst the speakers, and I will aggregate their answers. So this is not finished, this webinar yet. As promised, I will also distribute a link to the recording and the presentation slides to you once the recording is uploaded. So this will take me 1 or 2 days. And we will also pass on the email addresses for the speakers, as many of you wanted to network with them for some of your projects. With this, I would like to thank you for our webathon. This really became a webathon. We thank the speakers joining us in from Australia all the way up to the east coast of the US. Our audience joining in from, well, I think it was really across the globe now. You saw a peak of 71 people connected at the same time, simultaneously. We will be in touch. You are now on our distribution list. We will contact you for the next webinar. Actually, the next one is on farmers' rights, which is next week. The next communications webinar is I think in 3 weeks' time. But we'll let you know on the topics. We have the art of organizing webinars. We have one webinar on web streaming and webcasting and live casting. And we have one on innovative annual reports. So stay tuned. Thank you very, very much for joining in. Thank you again to the speakers to be persistent with all of the technical challenges. I wish everyone a good night, a good afternoon, and a good morning, and we'll join each other again very soon. Thank you very much, and thanks also, Charles, for your support. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.